Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into the gritty reality of how medieval peasants survived those brutal, bone-chilling winters. From smoky thatch roof huts and frozen livestock to rock-hard bread dinners and wolves circling the village, life was a non-stop fight against cold hunger and fear. Stick around to learn the clever hacks our ancestors used, like burning cow dung for heat, plus the festivals that kept spirits alive when supplies ran dangerously low. If you love quirky history that makes you grateful for modern heating, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring the bell. Comment below. Which winter struggle would you dread most, rationing firewood sharing space with livestock or facing roaming wolves? Let me know. Blanket tucked, tea steaming, eyelids coaxed half closed, you let the castle's last torch sputter out and follow the hush beyond the gate. The path is only a ribbon of dark earth ribbed with frost, but your souls remember its summer dust. Each step crackles like parchment, announcing you to empty fields where even crows have abandoned their watching posts. Cold is not a single pang. It is an empire marching up the body by inches, nose fingertips. Collarbone until it plants a banner in your chest and orders your breath to drift in cloudy files toward the stars. Those stars are ruthless tonight. Sharp points pricking the sky's velvet, letting chill spill straight through. Beyond the shivering paddocks, thatched cottages squat low against the wind-earthen beasts, huddling flank to flank. Smoke seeps from them in slow ribbons, gray geese, too tired to flap. While hoar frost plates every straw, so the hamlet glitters like broken glass beneath the wafer-thin moon. Roosting chickens mutter under overturned baskets. Their breath puffs like tiny kettle whistles. When you draw near, the smell shifts damp straw peat, a trace of dried dung pressed into fuel. A whole winter's worth of evenings has already been fed to hearths that never roar, only mumble. That breath once struck you as harsh. Tonight it promises embers still alive. The first door you reach is rough oak, strapped by iron hinges scabbed with rust, yet it holds an intimacy the marble portals of great halls never offered. Your knuckles rap twice habit rather than caution. The latch lifts with a resigned creak, and warm darkness rolls over your boots. Step inside. The world narrows to an amber pool cast by a single hearthstone, its embers pulsing like a sleeping animal. No jeweled tapestries hang here. Instead, rafters lacquered black by generations of smoke cradle bunches of thyme yarrow and the last curls of summer rosemary, now brittle as parchment. Between roof and floor, every inch brims with purpose. Wait until sight and breath slow to the room's own rhythm. Sparks twist into a brief constellation, then fade. The family is awake. Winter evenings stretch like spun wool, but voices stay low. Mindful that mud and wattle walls keep secrets only by courtesy. A mother stirs pottage in an iron cauldron, her ladle moving with the deliberate patience of someone who stretched one turnip across 3 meals. The stew exhales barley steam, scented with leek, and a cube of salt pork no larger than a thumb joint. Beside her, a father mends a leather strap, fingers rolling like walnuts in a pocket. 2 children share a scrap of wool blanket, tracing shapes in spilled grain games, invented where toys cost too dear. Every gesture is slow, unstartling, as if any sharp motion might shatter the fragile, warm bubble they defend. You ease the door shut, and the hut's temperature climbs a fragile degree. Every retained shard of heat is victory against a season that has besieged these walls since Michaelmas. Winter is negotiation. You offer fuel cloth patience. It grants grudging comfort. In summer, nobles debate taxes. Here, families bargain with cold itself, stick by stick, breath by breath. Fuel once seemed infinite when forests stood green. Now each log in the pile carries the memory of the axe stroke that freed it and the back that hauled it home. Underfoot, packed earth still exhales damp. Fresh rushes sprinkled with dried lavender soften the scent of clay and livestock. Each stalk is treated like tapestry fringe, for they will be changed only when Thaw turns the floor to mire. Overhead, a smoke hole hacked through thatch is no chimney, merely compromise too wide. Invites snow. Too narrow chokes lungs. Tonight, the balance holds fumes escape to spare watering eyes, yet linger long enough to press an insulating cloak beneath the eaves. Beads of tar glisten on rafters like midnight dew. An overturned ale cask slides nearer the hearth, a throne by necessity. Your spine replays the ride-frozen rain's stiff saddle, but the radiant glow unknots each ache. A child offers a horn cup, half filled with weak ale tasting of smoke and last year's barley. Water is riskier. The swallow spreads warmth behind your sternum, blooming like a remembered hymn. Grain from their strip field malted in a neighbor's clay oven, brewed in the very tub, doubling as wash barrel, now handed to a stranger without ceremony. In that gesture, you taste the economy of trust that keeps winter nights from closing in. From this vantage, the hut reveals its quiet treasures. A cured ham, mostly bone, hangs beside onions the color of old brass. Hoops of hard cheese cradle in cloth. Slings above the beams turned each week to keep mold honest. A bronze pot waits to catch roof drips. When full, its water will soften flax for spinning and temper the sourdough come Lent. A pile of chipped wooden spoons testifies to evening's carving stories into chores. Near the doorway, a hewn yoke stands ready for the ox once soil softens. Every item wears two faces tool and talisman shaped by repeated survival. Outside, gusts shove against wattle walls, rattling doors like beggars, and coaxing a low moan from the single cow penned beside the house. Her breath billows silver, yet those warm lungs add priceless degrees to the family's air. Inside the room's pulse slows to the cadence of logs settling into embers. Your own heartbeat adopts that unhurried tempo, muffled by snow and gratitude. This is our first lesson before supplies can be counted, or chores assigned or must surrender to scarcity, sat at the hearth of those who know cold by its many names and feel warmth as something earned, never assumed. Let the castle fade. Anchor yourself here where survival whispers instead of boasts, and discover how endurance grows quiet roots in the deepest dark. Stay long enough, and you'll hear the faint crack of distant ice on the village pond. A reminder that the outside world is still locked beneath a glassy lid, waiting for thaw. But here for this moment, embers glow, and that is enough. The embers shrink to a low red murmur, and the hush inside the cottage grows so thick you can almost rest your head against it. Yet cold is patient. It never rushes the siege. So even here within the fragile glow, you feel the next chill creeping back through gaps in the wattle like a scouting party testing every seam. Instinct tells the family what to do long before intellect catches up. A girl rises, shaking straw from a corner bundle, and drapes a second cloak over the doorframe. Another layer buys them perhaps the width of a candle flame's warmth, but winter is fought inch by inch, layer by layer, and no victory is too small to tally. Your own limbs respond in kind. First, the linen undertunic, still clinging with damp, where snow melted earlier, must be freed. It peels away like shed bark, revealing gooseflesh hills and valleys along your arms. Over that goes a clean shift, rough spun, yes, but dry and blessedly warm, after a brief rest on a stool near the coals. Then the woolen kirtle dyed a dull madder red, now fading toward rust, pulled down to your hips with a practiced hitch so it won't snag on boots. Next, A homespun surcoat. Its seams puckered from 3 winters of patching slips across your shoulders like a patient's blanket. Finally, the outer cloak, heavy enough to feel like the embrace of an older, sterner sibling, settles at your throat. A circle and line brooch pins the layers closed. A sprig of yarrow is tied through its ring, half charm, half fragrance against the smoke. Across the room, the mother dismisses the stew's final simmer with a nod, then layers herself just as deliberately. Linen chemise. Wool gown, stitched on sleeves that button from elbow to wrist. Fingerless mitts knit during Advent, and a hood of undyed fleece that frames her face in a pale halo of lanolin-scented comfort. Every garment tells a story of previous seasons, the dropped hem from her last pregnancy, the darned elbow where she leaned too close to a flame, the dark grease smear that never washed out after helping butcher a hog. Winter fashion here is a ledger. Each repair saves coin. Each coin spares grain. Each grain bars the door against hunger. The father's preparations feel more martial. He reaches for a leather jerkin stiffened with scraps of rawhide tugs, it over a broad linen shirt whose collar still bears the pinked edge of a fair day purchase 5 summers back. Around his calves, coil thick winingas, long wool strips, wrapped like riders on a spiral stair, keeping trousers close to skin, so cold cannot steal the air trapped there. He knots them just below the knee, triple-checking the tension because a loosened band means snow slipping through and icing the flesh beneath. Finally, he grabs wooden patten slab soles strapped under worn boots to lift his feet above half-frozen muck when he steps outside at dawn. With each buckle cinched, he is less a man and more a fortress disguised as one. Clothing finished attention slides to the arsenal of small defenses lining the room's edges. Near the hearth, a bundle of dried nettle stalks rests ready to feed the fire without draining the precious oak logs stacked against the outer wall. A basket bristles with fire-starting splinters shaved thin as parchment. Wasting flint sparks on chunks of log is folly when flicks of tinder catch quicker and brighter. On a shelf, lumps of peat cut from the bog last August and sun-cured to lightweight bricks wait their turn. They burn slow-smelling of ancient moss and distant thunder, but release a lasting heat perfect for the long hours before dawn, when nobody dares leave the blankets to stoke the blaze. Someone opens the shutter beside you, just a sliver so eyes can scout the night. What once appeared ebony now reveals gradations of iron gray and ash white, a quilt of sky so dense with cloud it presses its weight on your eyelids. Somewhere out there, the first fragile skin of ice is tightening over puddles turning mud into stone underfoot. Hoofprints left by the steward's horse only yesterday now stand rigid sharp as cast metal. Even the air has a smell of locking mechanisms, as though it carries invisible keys, clicking tumblers into place around trees. Soil and bone. It is easy to understand why the first reaction to such tidings is denial maybe. The wind will shift. Maybe the thaw will return. Maybe this cloak alone will suffice. But the wind answers by curling through the crack in one long, steady sigh, and every knuckle in the room seems to ache in response. Denial then becomes ritual. You remember how the season first whispered along village talk. A few cold nights is all said, the baker, while fetching his last bowl of river water. Leave the onions in the ground till Candlemas advised a neighbor too hopeful for his own good. Even you clung to a summer tunic well into November because sleeves felt like surrender. But when the breath of every living thing began rising in white columns at dawn, cows, children, crows, the truth settled over the valley. No proclamation, no trumpet, just darker dawns and thinner gruel. Rejection gave way to preparation, and preparation now cements into routine. With garments secured, the family checks their own bodies like sentries at a gate. Fingers flex, coaxing blood to fingertips. Breath clouds fill the cramped interior, fading slowly. Proof that lungs are still pumping waves of warmth into the air. The children each hold palms close to the hearthstones, counting heartbeats until heat pricks skin, then wrapping arms tight around themselves to trap it. You copy the exercise and feel an almost guilty pleasure as warmth shivers through your ribs. The mother ladles stew into small wooden trenchers, each a shallow carved dish, whose edges are polished slick by years of spoon friction. The portions are modest barley swollen, like tiny moon's shreds of kale, unraveling in broth. 2 slivers of salted pork, floating like lost oars, but salt and steam trick the mind into fullness. Eating is a timed art too fast, and the food swells in your stomach uncomfortably. Too slow, and it chills to a greasy paste. You take measured spoonfuls, letting each rest on your tongue until flavor melts away. A scattering of dried sage snaps up the back of your throat, some small luxury saved for solstice feasts, but used here because spirits sag when the weather strikes new lows. After bowls are scraped clean, the father stands, jerkin already creaking, and lifts a lantern shielded by thin horn panels. One by one, he seals the shutter nudges a peat brick into the fire's belly and drapes a coarse wool curtain across the hearth opening to funnel heat outward. These motions form the closing chapter of every evening. Insulation tightened, fuel rationed, light reduced to the bare minimum. Before sleep, he checks the roof beam where hams hang beside onions. A gentle knock confirms the meat is still solid, the bulbs still dry. Should either sweat spoil or vanish, winter arithmetic tips abruptly toward famine. Finally, he pushes the heavy door bar into its slot. Inside and outside are no longer merely places on a map. They are time zones in which 2 different worlds operate. Out there, cold commands. Earth hardens foxes, prowl for unwatched hens. In here, heat negotiates soul's rest, and dreams attempt to wander somewhere green. Everyone settles onto straw pallets arranged like spokes around the hearth. Cloaks become blankets, boots become pillows, and mitts remain on hands because a midnight ember can sputter without warning. You lie back, staring up through the ghost-laced air at the smoked rafters and the thin, perfect circle of the smoke hole. A single star winks through no brighter than the last spark on a burnt log, yet enough to remind you that above every ceiling of hardship stretches a country of light, untouched by frost. You tug your cloak up to your chin and feel how each layer both weighs you down and lifts anxiety away. This is your second lesson. Survival is tailored. 1 garment, 1 habit. 1 stubborn refusal at a time. Denial may whisper comfort, but only preparation stitches it to the skin. As sleep drifts close, the last thing you notice is how the family's breaths rise in quiet unison, a soft loom weaving warmth from nothing but air and faith, promising you'll all wake together come dawn's first brittle light. Dawn arrives timidly, more rumor than light. Yet the change in darkness nudges you awake before a rooster ever thinks to crow. The cottage air has cooled to the edge of your breath, each exhale puffing small silver petals that wilt the instant they drift beyond cloak-lined borders. Somewhere nearby, the father stirs. Leather jerkin groans as he shifts. Winingas rasp against straw, and his boots thud to the floor like stones dropping into a pond that never learns to ripple. 1 flint snap, too. Then the answering kiss of spark on tinder. Familiar sounds that knit a fragile thread between sleep and survival. That ember thread matters because the hearth has dozed into a sullen heap of gray ash, its crimson heart buried deep. If new flame isn't teased out now, the room will slide from chilly to lethal before noon. The father knows this duel by heart. Kneeling, he slides a splinter of pine into the ash pile, hunting for heat, the way a doctor listens for a pulse. A faint orange wink greets him proof. Last night's peat brick still smolders. He cups the ember with a half-hollowed horn, blowing slow enough that cheeks barely flex. You watch cinders glow brighter, then stretch like cats awakening. Over them, he layers curls of birch bark nature's own paper, oily and eager, followed by a slim finger of hazel. Flame flutters coughs, then steadies into a tongue tall enough to lick the pot chain. Only when it stands on its own does he feed thicker sticks willow for quick heat oak for endurance. The mother, roused by the first crackle, draws the wool curtain from the hearth so warmth can flood the room. She crushes yesterday's spent rushes underfoot, sweeping them toward the door with a broom of tied twigs. Fresh rushes, blended with dried lavender, replace the old, releasing a sigh of green into smoke-laden air. Winter chores do not wait for daylight. They ripple outward from the rekindled hearth the way circles widen on water. Breakfast is not a separate meal here, merely the next permutation of pottage. The big iron cauldron never cools entirely. It receives leftovers like a storyteller, weaving new chapters into an endless saga. The mother lifts the lid and skims the skin of fat that floated up overnight. Precious fuel she ladles into a clay jar for lamp grease. Into the pot, she drops a handful of barley, a cup of chopped parsnip, 3 dried mushroom caps, and a pinch of nettle leaf for color. Water from the bronze drip pot loosens the thick stew with a hiss. Soon, a gentle plop. Plop resumes, marking time better than any church bell because it speaks directly to hunger. Children each have a task scaled to size. The older girl drags a wicker basket of peat beside the hearth, stacking pieces by length so her father can grab blindfolded later. The younger boy sorts splinters into 2 piles, short for morning long. For evening, chanting a rhyme to keep count: 1 for the dawn, 2 for the dusk, 3 for the cold that bites like a tusk. Even play warps into utility under the rain of frost. With flame secure and stew progressing, the family turns to the day's indoor labors. The father settles on the bench with a stack of iron tools rescued from the shed before Locke's froze sickle scythe blade plowshare. He draws a whetstone across dull edges in steady strokes that sound like distant crickets. Sparks briefly compete with the hearth fire before twinkling out on the packed earth. Each honed edge is a pledge to spring forged weeks before any seed will dare split soil. Beside him, the mother sets up her distaff and spindle. Flax fibers soaked overnight in the drip pot water and wrung almost dry hang like pale riverweed from a wooden arm. She teases strands, free twisting them between finger and thumb until they form a continuous thread that coils around the spindle's shaft. The faint whir of wood spinning on its point threads through the sickle song, weaving a duet of preparation. Thread spun today might become a child's sock before frost retreats. In wintertime itself is spun pure labor, converted into future comfort. You guessed, in this choreography are handed a humble but vital roll feather fletching. A small sack of goose feathers waits at your feet, plucked during the autumn slaughter. Beside it, straight sticks trimmed from hedgerow hazel lie bundled with twine. The father demonstrates split one end of a stick position. 3 feathers evenly bind them with sinew, soaked soft in warm water, then set aside to dry. These will become arrows for spring fowling, or perhaps for guarding lambs against hungry wolves when snow thins their natural prey. Weapon or tool, the arrow shows how winter forces foresight. Even leisure crafts tilt toward necessity. Hours ooze by, measured in log rotations and ladle turns. Now and then, someone rises to stretch to shake pins and needles from stiff knees to open the shutter a hand width and judge daylight. The view remains a monochrome patchwork of white fields and leaden sky, but sensing the world beyond four walls keeps thoughts from icing over. Occasionally, a traveler's bell echoes from the road, perhaps a monk or a wool merchant braving frozen ruts. The father pauses, sharpening to listen, head tilted, then resumes. Visitors this deep into winter are rare and rarely welcome their hunger as bulky as their gratitude, midway between dawn and dusk. Though clocks are luxury here, the mother declares the stew ready. Bowls emerge, not wooden this time, but trenchers cut from stale rye bread baked weeks ago into rounds hard as slate. Hot pottage ladled onto the edible plate softens the crust just enough to chew later, capturing every last droplet of broth. You cradle the trencher like an infant, letting heat seep through mitt-wrapped fingers before scooping rhythmic bites. The taste is humble earthy grains, a ghost of pork, but it arrives paired with the deeper flavor of security proof that planning and labor keep bellies from echoing winter's hollow howl. After the meal, scraps onion skin bone shard, wilted nettle, are tossed into a clay pot for tomorrow's stock. Nothing leaves the economy of the cottage unless it exits as smoke or steam. Even ash has duty once cooled. It will be sifted into lye water for laundry or soap. Waste is a vocabulary banned by cold, every letter repurposed into survival grammar. With bellies warmed, afternoon tasks resume, but conversation now threads lightly through the work. Stories of saints who tamed wolves, riddles about frost giants, memories of last summer's village fair, all told in hushed, steady tones so as not to jostle the delicate hush holding winter at bay. You listen while binding feathers, noting how each tale circles back to endurance saints, surviving exile heroes, outwitting ice dragons, neighbors laughing despite hailstones, flattening barley. Narrative here is a second hearth banking embers in the mind. Light drains from the shutter opening, bleeding gray into black, and the rhythm of the cottage tilts toward evening again. Tools are stowed. The distaff is propped in a corner, and the day's final fuel ration is measured 2. Oak splits, 1 peat brick. The father opens the door just long enough to fling the day's sweepings ash. Crumbled rushes a heel of chewed bone into the yard for chickens to scratch by moonlight. The wind barges in behind him, swirling sparks skyward before the wool curtain hushes its mouth. As night recloses its iron fist, you feel the full circle of the cottage's breath. Ember to smoke smoke, to soup soup, to work work, to ember once more. This is point 3. The hearth is both engine and heartbeat, and every motion in its glow, sharpening sickle. Spinning flax fletching arrows draws warmth into more than flesh. It stokes resolve. Outside winter may tighten its siege with snow yet unseen, but inside each chore completes a barricade higher than stone. When at last pallets are spread and cloaks transformed into blankets again, you understand that tomorrow's survival was forged today in the quiet alchemy of ash and industry fire, coaxed into future. The afternoon settles into a muted hush, the sort that folds itself around every object until even the ticking drip pot seems reluctant to break it. Yet quiet never means idleness here. Beyond the wattle wall, a low bellow rasps through the stillness, and everyone in the cottage answers without speaking. The cattle are ready for their turn at the fire's borrowed comfort. Boots are tugged on whiningas, retied mitts checked for holes. You follow the father outside lantern in hand, the doors sigh spilling one fragile ribbon of heat into the pale yard before latching shut again. Snow has crept up past the doorstep drift upon drift laid like pages in a book no one asked to read. Each step toward the byre compresses white into flat ivory stones, crunch echoing off the frozen thatch. The cow's breath plumes over the fence rails, 5 shaggy heads haloed in silver eyes, rolling with a mix of boredom and thinly veiled accusation. Nourishment should arrive sooner. Shelter should be warmer. Winter should be shorter. They are the farm's living engines, and in this bleak season, warm bodies are nearly as valuable as milk or muscle. The father pats a flank, murmuring nonsense that sounds like lullaby, and contract in equal parts while you lift a gate bar stiff with frost. Inside the byre, straw lies deep and damp around the edges, where yesterday's melt seeped under the door. Pitchfork tines bite into a fresh bale. Sweet hay scent punches through the cold like a sudden memory of July, a promise that summer wasn't only a dream. You scatter forkfuls over the earthen floor, fluffing it with toes so it will insulate bellies as well as hooves. Each cow shuffles forward to claim its portion breath. Huffing clouds that drift toward the rafters and hang there softening the icicle spikes overhead. When the last mouth finds the manger, the father checks water buckets, swiftly hammering a seam of ice with the back of the axe until dark liquid shows. It's a crude method, but 2 extra swallows of unfrozen water can keep an udder safe from illness. Work shifts to manure next steam-laden heaps, scooped into a wheelbarrow to be trundled toward the compost trench behind the hop poles. The father jokes that dung is winter's richest coin. You can feel its warmth even through gloves, and your breath curls faster with the exertion. By the time the barrow is emptied, cotton beneath your kirtle sticks to skin, and the air feels strangely mild, despite the gray sky tightening like a lid overhead. Chores creep into every crack of daylight. After the cows, the lone sow grunts from her pen, stamping in hopes of turnip peelings. She will farrow come Candlemas if luck holds bacon in the making lard. For lanterns bristles for brushes, and so her comfort matters. The father mixes a mash of steamed barley dregs and mash water, watching till she snorts approval, then counts her breaths until they ease into contentment. The yard goose-eyes you from beside the half-frozen trough feathers, puffed beyond normal dignity, but you know she doubles as watchdog. Her honk can rouse the cottage faster than any bell if foxes lurk. The last task outdoors is firewood. Evenings demand 2 oak splits and 1 willow to coax the peat's steady heart. From a leaning shed, you drag billets stacked back in lammas when sap ran thick. Oak splits ring like dull bells when knocked together each note, a ledger entry of labor already spent, felling, lopping, dragging, seasoning. You shoulder what weight you can manage, arms trembling, but cheeks glowing, and follow the father's trudging trail of half-filled footprints to the house. By the door, you pause to brush the snow off cloaks and shake sawdust free. Every loose fleck inside will draw damp, and damp saps warmth. Re-entering the cottage feels like slipping beneath bathwater. Heat hasn't grown. Your chilled skin merely notices it anew. The mother turns from the cauldron with a nod, cheeks flushed by steam. Behind her, the elder child has coaxed the hearth into a bright roar, stacking split willow in a crisscross that funnels flames high. They dance shadows across ceiling beams, glossed with decades of soot, turning each hanging herb bundle into a small, twirling puppet. Hay dust still clings to your lashes, so the younger child hands you a rag dampened with warm water to wipe face and hands. Hospitality here is efficiency. A clean guest is 1 less source of sickness. You sink onto the ale cask stool while the father stoops to arrange the newly fetched logs near the fire, placing them bark side out. So any hibernating beetles won't scamper onto embers and create surprise sparks in the night. The room's rhythm shifts as afternoon thins. The mother ladles a half-cup of thin ale for each child, their daily allotment, safer than water, mild enough to calm nerves but not muddle minds. She stirs a pinch of crushed coriander from a leather pouch into theirs, a luxury spice traded months ago for eggs. In the corner, the spindle rests. Now her hands reach for knitting needles and a half-finished mitten. Wool slides, clacks, pauses, resumes a metronome you can almost set your heartbeat to. The father wraps a length of boiled leather around a scythe blade and ties it snug, oiling the metal beneath so rust won't sneak in before spring mowing. Conversation floats easier now that physical work is done. The family speaks of errands deferred until the Pentecost fair salt to purchase linen to trade, of rumors carried by the steward that wolves prowl lower down the valley, of whether the frost will deepen enough to ice the river solid for St. Bridget's Day, making travel simpler, but fishing impossible. You contribute a story from another shire about a mill that runs even through ice, its wheel crusted in crystal lace. The children stare wide-eyed, half believing, half imagining what bread made from such magical flour might taste like. Even light from the small window gives up, smearing into black. The father trims the rushlight, its tallow-soaked stalk flickering like a votive that refuses to extinguish. Shadows stretch and finally merge, erasing corners until the room becomes a single breathing shape. Supper tonight is oatcakes griddled on a stone laid sideways in the fire-crisped edges, fragrant with peat smoke. Each diner breaks cake, dips it into pottage, and passes the remnant to the next circle after circle until only crumbs remain. Later, those crumbs will be swept into the cauldron, their starch thickening tomorrow's broth. Sleep traffic starts early when nights own 3/4 of the clock. Pallets are unrolled. The children share one, the parents another ewe, a third patched with rabbit skins. Before bedding down, the father fetches a wooden mallet and taps every roof support test for ice weight collecting outside. Satisfied the beams hold firm, he wedges the door with a second bar. Wolves and men alike think twice about double iron. Then he leads a brief murmur of prayer. Thanks for animals fed hands kept whole fire still breathing. No high theology, just gratitude pinned to simple nouns. Lying beneath the cloak, you feel warmth from the cows still radiating through the wall, a low, steady pulse like the earth's own heartbeat. It mingles with ember heat, with breath heat, until the cottage seems suspended in a pocket of weather, all its own, small but sufficient. Somewhere beyond the shutter wind sculpts new drifts, but here inside the stitched-together fortress of mud straw and animal life, you sense a resilience larger than architecture. The night may lengthen, but every creature, human or hoofed, contributes a wick of warmth, and that collective flame pushes the dark back just far enough for dreams. This is how the hamlet passes another round of winter's test, by turning beasts into both furnace and friend, by trading sweat for hay and hay for heat, by folding the raw breath of cattle into the fabric of family survival. As eyelids sag, you catch the faint creak of a cow shifting her weight. Hear milk slosh quiet in an udder and drift off, knowing that behind a wall of clay flesh and fur, keep vigil so the fire can rest. Dawn's first pale smear has not yet lifted itself above the ridge when the mother rises, guided more by muscle memory than sight. The cottage lies hushed beneath a quilt of animal breath and dying embers. Yet the hour is already late in winter's arithmetic. Every moment wasted lets cold dissolve calories faster than labor can replace them. She moves like a shadow toward the hearth, nudging last night's peat brick apart with an iron poker. Tiny sparks flutter reluctant moths that have forgotten summer flames, but a twist of birch bark awakens them. light enough to see shelves bins crocks, that silent ledger of how many meals remain before the thaw. You help without needing instruction. First, the pit under the hearthstone, a shallow cubby lined with straw, where root vegetables sleep like buried coins. The mother lifts the slab with care lift too often, and the dirt loses its chill. Lift too little, and rot creeps in unseen. She assesses the hoard. Turnips no bigger than clenched fists, parsnips wizened, but serviceable 2 onions, soft at the neck. She removes 1 onion, 2 turnips, returns the rest, and seals the slab as though tucking secrets back into soil. Each chosen root is brushed clean, kissed by her thumb's callus, then placed into a wooden trencher by the fire to sweat off frost. Next comes the salting tub, a cask sunken half its height in packed earth to keep brine from freezing. Its lid rises with a sigh that smells of distant coastlines. Sea salt meat time. Strips of pork, gray-white with fat, ripple in the cloudy liquid like seaweed. She counts aloud 1, 2, 3 pieces, then lets the lid clunk shut, sealing in that ocean ghost. Each strip is heavy, but shrunken salt, having drawn youth from muscle. Still fried crisp, it will crown the evening's pot. It is not indulgence, it is morale rendered edible. You carry a clay jug to the door, push aside the hanging cowhide, and scoop snow into its mouth until packed tight. Set near the fire, it will melt to water, clearer than any well this season, filtered by sky and silence. Outside, frost clings to your lashes. Inside, drops drum into the jug's bottom, like timid feet crossing a threshold. The father wakes to this rhythm and joins the small procession of gathering. His lane leads to the rafters, where strings of dried apples, pears, and plums tangle among herbs. With a knife's tip, he frees a palmful of wrinkled fruit, sliding them into his pocket, so the warmth of his thigh will soften them for dessert. Luxury measured in thumb-sized tokens, tokens doled like blessings after night prayers. He next checks the cheese-sling wheels of hard cow's milk cheese, suspended in cloth to keep mice and damp at bay. A practiced knock returns a hollow note, still safe. He flips each wheel to prevent sweating, then scrapes a thin shard from one edge. The sliver snaps between his teeth like dry wood, releasing a tang of stored summer pastures. A nod confirms to the room that protein reserves remain intact. As ingredients assemble, the cauldron greets them with a simmering welcome. Water first, then barley dredged from a linen sack, then cubed turnip, julienned parsnip, minced onion. The vegetables hit with soft plinks, sinking through steam into yesterday's broth. A wooden spoon stirs. The grains swirl each lap around the pot, a rehearsal of patience. The mother adds a pinch of ground mustard seed heat for the throat, then lays the salted pork strips across the surface, fat already purling. She lowers the chain 1 link to settle the pot deeper into firelight, snugs the lid, and steps back as though fastening a door. The stew will police itself for hours now, yet fuel feeds hunger as surely as food. The father shoulders open the door and braves the yard's biting air to inventory the woodpile. Log ends, whitened by frost, resemble bones stacking a giant's hearth. Oak dwindles fastest. Willow remains plentiful, but burns too quick. He consults the mental chart etched behind his eyes nights until Candlemas splits required per night allowance for storms, and selects 4 oak billets, 2 willow, an armful of hazel twigs. Inside, he stacks them with the precision of a stonemason bark outward, to dry sapwood inward to kiss flame later. 1 twig is broken to test moisture. It snaps clean green enough to smoke dry enough to burn slowly. Perfect for afternoon. Meanwhile, children gather crumbs of last night's oatcakes from the table, wiping the board with licked thumbs and pressing remains into a small jar. Those crumbs will later thicken broth or crust a skillet to keep mash from sticking. Waste is a sin with a liturgy of consequences. Even ashes are saved for lie when laundry day finally dares the cold. You are tasked with grinding a handful of dried peas in the quernstone at the corner. Kneel, pour peas, set the upper stone, and push the wooden handle in circles. Stones grow heavier each lap, or arms grow weaker. Either way, the creak matches heartbeat. Peas fracture into pale green meal, destined to thicken tonight's pot and stretch protein a little wider across ribs. While you grind, you overhear the mother teaching the younger child arithmetic with beans. 1 bean for each day left in Christmastide. Beans removed nightly to mark passage toward Epiphany. Time turned tangible eatable if hunger outpaces patience. When the scent of boiling pork fat escapes the lid, the room's spirits rise like dough. The father slices a shaving of hard cheese into each child's palm, and they press it to tongues until it melts into creamy salt. You receive yours last. Etiquette dictates newcomers eat after household, but hospitality demands none go without. The cheese stings faintly, a warning that thirst will follow, yet the snow water now steams in a kettle, ready to dilute weak ale for a warm drink. Midday arrives disguised as gray twilight, and the door is opened briefly to toss dishwater a pale arc that freezes before it meets the ground. A gust barges in, smacking cheeks with its cold palm, but the stew answers by burping fragrant steam, reasserting dominion. The family reseats themselves for the main meal, still the same pot, richer now. Each bowl receives a drift of barley, a soft square of pork ribbons of root. The father sprinkles in the ground pea meal. Within moments, the broth thickens to velvet. Spoons pause for grace. Not formal Latin, just thanks that every ingredient surrendered at the right time. Then wood-scraping clay echoes around the hearth. Hunger softened the afternoon slides into smaller labors, mending gloves, twisting rope from hemp fibers, scratching calculations on a wax tablet to guess whether barley stores can spare another handful per day come March. The mother unseals a jar of honey slivers 2 plum halves into it and sets it near the hearth. By dusk, warmth will coax fruit into syrup, a dessert measured in teaspoons. She winks conspirator to the children, promising sweetness for good silence during her tall tales tonight. Light drains yet again. Shutters are barred. A final ration of willow sets the hearth to humming flames, fluttering like pennants marking the edge of sanctuary. The stew pot, half emptied, is refreshed with water scraps and tomorrow's promise. Lids are tied on crocks. The root pit is sealed. Cheese rehung. Peas hulled and stored. Everything returns to waiting. As bedding is rolled out, you reflect cold may own the fields, but larders map an interior continent where summer is preserved in salt smoke and stone. Every jar wheel and sack is a star in a constellated defense against hunger. Tonight, bellies heavy enough to ignore the wind's howl, the cottage breathes a rare sense of surplus. Not abundance, never but enough. That word glows dimly, like embers under ash. Enough pork to scent the broth. Enough barley to thicken it. Enough cheese to melt on tongues, enough days in store to believe spring will keep its promise. And so, point 5 closes in. That slow exhale of satisfaction, the taste of stored sun lingering on every palate, while winter snarls uselessly at the walls it cannot chew through. Twilight settles over the hamlet like a woolen hood, muffling the last rattle of wooden bowls and the faint hiss where pork fat once danced on the cauldron's rim. The stew has withdrawn to its simmering vigil, thickening itself for tomorrow, while the hearth burns low in deference to the dwindling woodpile. Embers glow through a lace of ash. Quiet coals steady as a pulse beneath blankets. You ease back onto the ale cask stool and feel a softness in your belly that passes for luxury this time of year. The mother wipes her hands on a linen scrap, already stained by a dozen meals, then folds the cloth as though it were altar linen, and tucks it into a box beside the fire. Order is another kind of fuel. Keep things neat, and the mind stays warm. The father leans against the wall and produces a tiny leather pouch. From it tumble 2 dice carved out of sheep knuckle bones, their edges worn smooth by countless wagers, too small for coin. He tosses them into a wooden bowl, the clack sounding louder than the wind outside. A grin splits his beard. He invites you to join. The stakes are harmless first choice of the driest blanket later, but even pretend risk brings a spark to the children's eyes. You pick up the bones, palm their chill, and roll. 6 and 5. Gasps all around. The girl counters with a pair of 2s, the boy with an unlucky tumble that bounces clear out of the bowl and skitters under a stool. Laughter follows muted but real as he crawls after it and pops back up hair dusted in ash triumphant. For a few heartbeats, Winter forgets to gnaw. When the dice return to their pouch, the hearth becomes a stage. The mother reaches overhead to pluck a bundle of dried sage, and fennel crushes a pinch between her fingers and drops the crumbs onto the coals. A spiced fragrance unspools through the room, sharp enough to wipe cobwebs off thought. She settles beside the fire, beckons the children close, and begins a tale in a voice low and even like water under thick ice. Tonight, she chooses the legend of Saint Blaise, the healer of throats fitting, while smoke still bristles in your own. Her words paint a bishop wandering forests, blessing beasts, calming wolves. When persecutors find him, birds weave a cloak of feathers to shield him from arrows. The children lean into every image, mouths tipped open eyes, reflecting fire like startled cats. You catch yourself leaning too, lulled by the cadence fingers, unconsciously tracing circles on your knee, as though stirring the story deeper. Halfway through, the wind lifts its voice beyond the shutter, rattling the latch with a hard knuckle. The father pauses the narrative with a glance at the roof beam. A new moan answers 2 timbers, complaining about snow weight. He stands, grabs a lantern, and disappears outside to judge the drift. Through a chink in the wall, you glimpse his silhouette climbing a ladder lantern, swinging like a solitary star. Snow hisses off thatch in dull slides as he knocks it free, then thumps to the ground with the sigh of loosened teeth. When he returns, beard stippled white, he stamps boots free of clinging flakes and shakes his head. No damage, merely vigilance rewarded. Inside, vigilance of another sort takes hold. The younger child coughs a high bark-edged sound that slices through every ear. The mother's eyes flick to the herb rack. She pulls down a strip of linen already steeped in honey, and time warms it by the fire, then wraps it around the boy's neck. From a pottery jug, she pours a trickle of mead into a wooden cup, mixes in crushed garlic, and hands it over. The potion smells fierce, but the child accepts it like sacrament eyes watering. You remember rumors from larger villages where plague sometimes rides winter winds. A single cough can echo with prophecy. Yet here beneath rafters, black with generations of smoke, the cure begins with warmth herbs. And the unwavering belief that care itself carries healing. As the child's coughing subsides to an occasional rasp, the tale resumes. Saint Blaise walks free under feathered cloak-blessing throats in valleys far from persecution. The mother ends with a gentle "Amen," prompting the father to reach into a low chest and withdraw a stub of beeswax candle saved since All Hallows. He sets it in a clay holder beside the rushlight, saying they'll burn both on St. Blaise's feast if wax permits. Festivals punctuate winter like stepping stones. Even when larder's thin, there must be some small brightness to navigate by. Conversation turns to the parish priest's promise of a Candlemas procession weather allowing. The mother wonders how many tapers remain in the church stores, whether the steward can spare a length of tallow for poor households. The father rubs thumb and forefinger together, measuring a coin invisible to all but him. 1 penny here, another there. Fees and tithes stacking like drifts. Still, he allows a blessed candle wards more than darkness. You ask about past Candlemas nights. The father describes lanterns bobbing through snow like floating embers, villagers singing Latin. They barely understand each note, a breath cloud caught in the glow. When the priest blessed throats with crossed candles, a hush fell so complete you could hear the river ice settling. He remembers returning home to find the stew pot licked clean by the dog and laughing rather than scolding, because the world felt lighter for that one night. Outside, the wind's edge softens. Within, the air thickens with sleepy warmth. The mother spoons a thin gruel of oats and honey into the cough-racked child, urging slow sips. The elder girl yawns wide stretches like a cat and begins folding blankets for bed. You help lay straw beneath each pallet, fluffing it to trap air and keep bodies lifted from the cold floor. The room glows, amber stitched together by shared breath and the faint hum of the hearth. Before lying down, the father kneels by the door and traces a cross on the wood with thumb dampened in melted snow. A simple ward against wolves, raiders, and despair. He bars the latch winds the rushlight's wick a fraction lower and settles beside his wife on their pallet. You curl under your cloak the ale cask stool, now a footrest, and close eyes heavy with stew story and herb-scented air. Somewhere in the dark, a cow shifts chains, clink the roof. Creaks under a fresh gust, yet inside the cottage holds its own weather. Warmth braided from wood yarn laughter, and faith presses back against the outer cold. You realize that survival here is not merely stored food or stout walls, but the nightly weaving of spirits, dice-rattling stories, folding over coughs, prayers stitched into timbers. Tomorrow, embers will need stoking again. Wood will need splitting larders, will shrink by another onion. But tonight, under the soft breathing of those who dared carve life from winter, you drift toward sleep, certain that for all its hunger and howl, the dark has found no purchase inside these walls. Night has thinned, but not yet surrendered when the bells begin soft, uneven clangs, drifting from the distant chapel, carried on a wind that still smells of peat and iron. You surface from sleep, one note at a time, unsure whether the ringing is dream mist or metal. Around you, the cottage stirs a rustle of blankets, a muffled cough, the squeak of a pallet rope. Candlemas is a handful of days away. These pre-dawn tolls can mean only one thing: the steward's collector has arrived to take spice in place of coin grain, in place of taxes, and if rumor is true, a promise of labor once the thaw loosens the earth. The father rises first. He moves cautiously, not to spare the floorboards, they are packed dirt, but to keep from disturbing the fragile warmth clinging to each straw mattress. Pulling on his jerkin, he glances at the hearth embers, only dull as old garnets. He will leave them to the mother, whose domain is morning flame. Instead, he shoulders a cloak, still damp at the hem, pushes aside the bar, and slip-steps into a world tinted blue by moonset. You follow cloak, dragged like a wing behind you. Throat immediately needled by the cold. It is colder than yesterday. Your breath rises fast and thin, a warning that snow may return by eventide. The chapel stands a quarter-mile off stone set upon stone generations ago, when the Lord's grandfather wanted God anchored visibly to his land. Its single bell hangs from a timber frame outside the tower was never finished, and the sexton pulls the thick rope, nodding toward each villager who emerges from dark doorways. There will be no mass. The priest is still abed. This is merely a summons to gather at the manor granary to measure out what the Lord claims by right. a tithe of barley, a tithe of oats, and this year an extra basket of dried apples, because last summer's orchard bore beyond expectation. Luxury for some, leisure for others. The father leads your small procession across fields that crunch underfoot like broken crockery. The cows watch through frost-rimmed lashes, steam huffing from their nostrils in steady clocks. They know the routine when people make lines in the snow feed comes late. Beyond the byre, the lane narrows, flanked by hedges tufted white, and soon you see torch glow ahead. 2 servants of the steward, guarding the granary doors, pikes butt down in the crusted ruts. Inside, warm lantern light spills over barrels banded in iron. The steward, rotund in a fur-trimmed cloak, stands beside a scale large enough for a child to ride. He greets each household by name, gestures at their offering, and drops a wooden counter into a tally box. When the father's turn comes, he unslings a sack of oats you helped winnow weeks ago. Grain whispers across the scale's pan, the faint shush sounding like wind through summer grass. The steward weighs it, nods, then opens a ledger and scratches out a mark. There is also the matter of wood. The steward says words floating puffs of frost despite the lanterns. Lord Gervais desires 2 days' continued clearing of the eastern copse once weather suits. You'll bring your own tools. The father bows more bend of shoulders than waist, and replies with the single word all peasants practice like prayer I. No one bargains. Bargaining implies choice. Agreements here are woven from necessity, and the knowledge that refusal can snap livelihoods like dry sticks. Back outside, the eastern sky bleeds faint citron. Villagers drift homeward, shoulders sagging, but conversation rising in low murmurs. Calculations of seed left for sowing grumbles about why the Lord's roast must be flavored with orchard fruit, while children sniff stew so thin it ripples like pond water. Yet the air itself feels shared, almost communal, and their exhaled breaths braid together overhead before dissolving. Shared burden makes its own brief warmth. Returning to the cottage, you find the mother kneeling by a fresh-kindled fire, coaxing pine splinters into steady flame. The younger child still sleeps a damp spot on his sleeve, where cough syrup dribbled in the night. The elder Giri braids her hair in thick ropes, preparing to fetch water from a well rumored to be freezing over. The father speaks quietly of the steward's demand. The mother's face tightens just enough that the shadow of it lingers after she turns away to toss a fistful of barley into the cauldron. Breakfast is muted hot water, thickened with oat scrapings, sweetened by a single spoon of plum honey rescued from yesterday's hearth soak. The children sip cheeks pinking. The father dips his trencher only once the tithe lingers on his tongue, heavier than the thin gruel. You swallow your portion taste ash and distant fruit, and realize guilt can season food as surely as salt. Work waits. The axe needs a new haft before clearing can start. The father sets you to plane a length of ash wood grain running straight as winter days. Shavings curl to the floor like ivory ribbons, sparking brief fantasies of weddings and summer festivals you have never attended. Outside, the mother and daughter haul water, 2 wooden pails that clack against knees filled with slush the color of pewter. They upend them into a trough for the cows, then chip away ice so buckets can fill again, because laundry must be done before cloth stiffens beyond saving. On the path to the well, rumors travel faster than footsteps. The daughter returns with news that the miller's wife delivered twins last night, good fortune twisted with fear, because double mouths mean double barley come winter. Somewhere else, a thatch collapsed under drift. Neighbors stripped beams to use as firewood. Misery is a familiar guest, who sometimes brings comfort in knowing it visits others too. Inside the axe haft is fitted the wedge hammered, the blade honed until it can shave splinters off your thumbnail. The father tests its swing, one arc 2. A curt nod. He will leave before dawn tomorrow, trek across snow that crackles like breaking bones, and fell trees until sweat steams off his brows in crystallizing halos. The copse will echo with each strike, and each strike will echo with ode debt. Afternoon light tilts pale through the shutter. The mother wrestles linens in a tub by the fire, stirring gray water with a stick thicker than your wrist. She sings a hymn to time her. Scrubbing 4 verses, rinse 4 verses again. Steam licks her face, turning strands of hair into damp brush strokes on her forehead. The elder child threads bone needles with flax thread, patching mittens whose thumbs have worn to lace. The younger sleeps near the hearth mouth-slack skin, already less flushed since the night's fever. You're sent to the loft to fetch extra straw for pallets. Climbing the ladder, you smell dust mouse droppings, last year's wheat chaff. Beneath a small window, you find a bundle of rushes saved for Candlemas candles, pale and pliant. You tuck them under your arm, thinking of the priest's blessing, crossing throats like invisible armor. The sky through the slits glows violet now. A storm gathers clouds, sloping low like eyelids heavy with tears. By dusk, the wind resumes its hunt, rattling the shutters, testing the latch with icy fingers. The family eats early stew, enlivened by handfuls of fresh barley, the pork bones now sucked clean. After bowls are wiped, the father distributes work tokens. The children sort beans again, you carve a fresh spindle. The mother oils boots and lines them with sheepskin scraps, so morning frost won't bite so deep. Outside, the cows shift chains, thunk against posts, but their shared warmth seeps through walls, a deep bass hum beneath the treble of the storm. When night clamps down fully, the rushlight is lit, and the room contracts to a circle of golden hush. The father opens the small chest, where he keeps a scrap of parchment, an old tally of births and deaths. He adds 2 strokes for the miller's twins, wiping ink with a finger before it can freeze. Life arrives even when the soil sleeps, he says. Someone must remember the counting. The mother nods, threading a new strand through a worn cuff. Memory is also bred in these parts. You lie down, last cloak drawn to chin ears, bent to the wind's howl. Somewhere in the distance, another bell rings, not summons this time, but warning for travelers lost on the road. Yet within these walls, numbers have been paid, debts recorded tools, readied straw-fluffed water, hauled fever calmed. The ledger of survival shows black ink where red might have bled. So you drift towards sleep, feeling the slight fierce pride that grows when a village bends, but does not break, when even the Lord's levy cannot empty the storehouse of courage. Tomorrow's dawn will tally again, but tonight the sum is enough to hold the dark at the threshold. Moon silver still powders the yard when the father shoulders his axe, the new haft shining pale as bone in the starlight. His breath feathers out in hurried pulses. Dawn is a rumor, and the steward's pikes will judge any laggard. You pace beside him until the lane forks toward the Lord's copse. You back to the cottage, then watch his silhouette dwindle into the hedge-lined tunnel like a candle carried down a long corridor. The snow crunch beneath his boots lingers in your ears long after the darkness swallows him. A metronome of obligation striking miles of frozen ground. Inside, the mother slides the door bar home and listens until silence confirms wolves have not followed the parting. She stirs the embers until one flares, then adds a fist of hazel twigs. Their resin snaps, throwing copper sparks against rafters, furred black with smoke. The younger child dozes beneath blankets, curls loosening in easy spirals now that fever has ebbed. The elder laces Thaw stiff boots, bracing for her own errands, egg collecting, well breaking an armload of straw for the cow pen. You and the mother lock eyes today, will stretch long and thin, tugged by labor at both ends. She begins with the cauldron ladling out what little broth survived supper. It looks watery enough to read scripture through, but she tops it off with snow-melt shaves in pale curls of yesterday's pork fat, and shakes ground pea meal until the surface freckles green. The mixture lurches slowly around the pot, thickening each time it completes a lap, like a tired runner gaining strength from its own rhythm. A single crack of salt slips from her fingertips, small as mercy, but sharp enough to wake flavor. She hooks the chain higher, letting the brew nurse itself, while hands turn elsewhere. Somewhere below the cottage floor, the earth's iron core tugs invisible beads of cold upward. Frost spreads through rushes in size you can almost hear. The mother answers by unrolling twine from a pegged spool, weaving a lattice across the shutter cracks, then plastering thin mud over the gaps. It dries like clay parchment sealing drafts, but darkening the room to dusk even as morning stirs outside. A single rushlight kisses the gloom, back its flame, curving with each breath like a sleepy eyelid. Work parcels itself by warmth. While the cauldron breathes, you set the quernstone to grind rye for evening cakes. Stone grits against stone, vibrating through elbows into ribs, a rhythm that reminds you of the father's axe somewhere beyond the ridge. Same circle, different weapon. Flour drifts into the lower trough in lazy snow, and for a moment you resent its whiteness. Real snow carries starlight, this carries only labor. Still, when a small mound forms, it feels like coin minted from muscle. Outside, the elder girl returns cheeks-bitten apple-red apron, holding 3 eggs barely warmer than ice. She cracks one against her tooth checks for hairline fracture, then lowers them into a clay cup nested in straw near the hearth. The shells wobble delicate promises, protected by cautious heat. She reports that the well bucket clanged against solid ice halfway down. The last 2 yards must be chipped before noon if laundry water is to be had. The mother nods, tilts the cauldron lid to vent more steam, and hands her a chisel and mallet with quiet faith. Your thoughts follow the father along the copse path. You imagine the axe swinging arc after arc rhythm so relentless it blurs trunk blade breath into one humming shape. Snowgyre churns beneath his feet as each maple boughs creaks, then topples with a report that shakes crows from bare branches. Sap pulses startled beneath bark, but freezes before it can bleed. He hacks limbs into manageable lengths, stacking them like sentences he'll never speak. Payment spelled in timber. Around him, other men labor neighbors yesterday. Competitors today, their eyes blank as the sky, because neither sweat nor grievance can thaw taxes owed. Back in the cottage, the younger child wakes coughing soft but steady. The mother unknots the herb cloth from his throat, replaces the honey thyme strip with one dipped in warmed sage tea, and massages his shoulders through the blanket until the cough dwindles to a sigh. She is needle thread and seam in a single gesture, stitching wellness where fabric thinned. The boy's eyelids flutter. He reaches for her hand, finds it, and drifts back to shallow dreams scented faintly of sage and wood smoke. As midday skulks close, the elder girl staggers in with 2 pails sloshing gray water knuckles raw. The mother tips a ladleful into the cauldron, topping off humble riches, then sets the rest near the hearth, so ice skirts melt before wash time. She beckons you to taste the stew. You dip a wooden spoon, blow once, sip. The flavor surprises barley softened to velvet pork fat, glossing tongue pea notes, grounding the broth. It is no feast, yet it whispers of sufficiency, the sort that steadies a spine better than ale. When the door finally rattles late afternoon, the dog dozes too deeply to bark. The father steps in clothes crusted white eyebrows carrying sequins of ice. He shrugs the cloak free. Snow powder detonates in tiny storms around his boots. The mother thrusts a mug of hot water sweetened with honey toward him. He cups it like treasure, nodding once too spent for sentences. The axe leans beside the door blade, nipped haft, blackened by sweat. Payment delivered, debt acknowledged. Tomorrow the copse will still stand, but lighter by his labor. He eats straight from the cauldron, dipping a trencher quickly, before the children notice extra meat pieces, splinters of rabbit, gifted by a fellow woodsman who snared more than his family could stomach. He passes one morsel to you, another, to each child. The mother watches, measuring gratitude against tomorrow's shortage, then smiles thinly and says grace again for the rabbit that ventured foolishly into a noose. Evening collects its dues. Snow returns, whispering against the shutter like gossip, but the mud-plastered cracks hold, and the rushlight bows in a draft no longer present. The father mends the axe edge with a whetstone. Sparks fly, the children string beans on thread to dry for next year's planting, and the mother beats thawed linen against a scrubbing board until lakestone echoes through the cottage. Each task stitches the family closer warp, and weft pulled tight over a loom of necessity. Later, the father unfolds a piece of parchment, a letter from a cousin who migrated south before the frosts, searching for land without Overlord's shadow. He cannot read, but he's memorized the marks. A crooked circle means health to. Hash strokes mean baby born, and X means debt paid. He taps each symbol, explaining pride beneath tired breath. The mother traces a finger across faded ink, as though blessing the cousin from miles away. The children lean closer, hopeful and fearful that such freedom might one day beckon them too. Night folds once more. The cauldron, licked nearly clean, receives snow and bones preparing overnight broth. The mother tucks rushes around the shutter edges against louder wind. You and the father shake straw into fresh mounds, rearrange pallets. Share a glance, silent contract, that tomorrow no collector will toll bells, but hunger will still march. Cloaks become quilts, axes become pillows, pine scent smoke becomes lullaby. Beyond the walls, snow powders the wood he felled today, sheathing each billet in white armor until the hearth summons it. Within skin warms skin, breath warms breath, and the ledger of survival closes on another page, inked with endurance. Sleep finds you somewhere between the whetstone's last hush and the snow's first howl. You dream not of tithes or axes, but of spring plow furrows releasing steam under sun of barley heads, nodding heavy of a world without ledgers. Yet even as the dream deepens, a single truth rides beneath dawn will carve fresh columns on the account. And you will rise to balance them, knife or needle in hand, because winter respects only those who refuse to owe it anything more than sweat. The storm arrives as prophecy fulfilled, first a soft sigh against the thatch, then a relentless hiss that erases every familiar sound beneath its whitewash. You wake to darkness so complete, it feels liquid, but the cottage already pulses with subdued purpose. The mother kneels at the hearth, coaxing orange veins from yesterday's coals. The father, wide-shouldered silhouette, cinches his cloak tight, readying for another march to the copse, even though snow wallops the door like a drum. A quick counsel follows. He will not risk the drifted lane. Wood enough waits in the shed to last 2 days if rationed with care. Instead, attention shifts inward. What can be mended, stretched, or learned while the world is sealed in ice? The elder girl fetches the spindle, and Flax determined to finish the thread for a second mitten before evening. You take up the plane to shape spare kindling into dull toy soldiers for the younger boy, whose cough has quieted, but whose boredom now threatens to ignite. Sawdust dusts the air like miniature snowfall, sweet with the scent of summer-logged pine. On the far side of the room, the father unpacks the tool chest, cracked hammer, half-bent scythe rings, a lantern missing its horn pane. Winter may bar fields, but it offers an anvil of stillness for every postponed repair. Outside, daylight arrives late and colorless, filtering through the shutter slits as if ashamed. Now and then, a gust rattles the mud-patched boards, sending new snow into the yard with an audible thump. The cows low uneasily in the byre. The father pulls on Mitt's shoulders a lantern and slips through the door to check hooves and water. You glimpse his outline vanish into a whirling curtain of flakes lamp glow, swallowed yards away. For a breath, you imagine him drifting off the edge of the world, but moments later, he reappears. Beard salted white, reporting that the beasts stand warm on fresh straw, and the trough ice broke with a single axe-butt blow. The mother ladles midday pottage barley, thickened by yesterday's rye flour, pearled with tiny discs of carrot, harvested during Michaelmas, and pulled from sand-packed barrels this morning. She grants each bowl an extra ladle, as labor today burns calories faster than usual. Steam fogs the window slits, sketching ghost leaves on cold wood. Between spoonfuls, the father speaks of the copse of how maples sound different when frozen solid hollow like drums waiting for spring to beat them back to life. The children listen eyes wide, as though the trees themselves are wintering creatures, with hearts that only pause. When bowls are scraped clean, chores resume under softer light. You whittle toys until half a regiment stands at attention on the bench round-headed knights with acorn cap helmets and twig swords. The younger boy orchestrates mock battles, whispering raspy orders that end in cheerful victory every time. Laughter lifts the ceiling, brushing soot free to drift like black snow into the rushes. The mother shakes her head, smiling, reminding him to keep blankets close. Merriment chills the lungs quicker than silence. By mid-afternoon, the blizzard eases to a polite flurry. The father cracks the door to let in what he calls a ladle of fresh air. Cold rushes through, snatching sparks from the fire, but also carrying a crisp scent of pine and something faintly sweet, freshly broken spruce, perhaps. He sets a small tripod over the flames and hangs the kettle to brew willow bark tea remedy for sore limbs. Into the water, he drops a nub of ginger saved since Martinmas. The root was once a foreign marvel. Now no larger than a knucklebone, it is rationed slice by slice. The aroma unfurls warm enough to nudge aches from joints before the first cup is poured. News arrives on 4 legs at dusk. The neighbor's dog, a shaggy white cur, scratches the door and bolts inside when beckoned, dragging a leather pouch tied to its collar. Inside, a folded scrap of parchment declares that the miller's roof has partially collapsed. Hands are needed at first light to clear beams before weight crushes the grain stock. The father grunts, already pulling on his cloak. The mother stops him. Dark travel risks foot lantern and life. At dawn, she says the snow will settle. Paths will show. Meanwhile, she packs the dog's pouch with a crust of oatcake and a twist of smoked pork rind, scratching a quick reply in charcoal. We come with ropes and poles. Hold fast. The dog departs. Tail-high message secured like a torch in reverse darkness, carrying light. Night folds in swiftly, as though pulled tight by unseen threads. The family circles near the hearth, each layered in cloaks and blankets, yet spirits oddly buoyant. The father produces his reed pipe, cracked but tunable. He plays a slow reel notes, low and woody, weaving through the room like wisp smoke. The mother syncopates with a wooden spoon, tapping the cauldron rim. The elder girl taps her spindle against the bench, the younger drums toy soldiers on the floor. You clap time softly, palm against palm. For a heartbeat, it feels like Midsummer's Eve, not the dead of winter. When the tune fades, quiet trails close behind, deeper than before. The father murmurs a brief prayer for the miller's grain, the neighbor's courage, the trees still standing, and the unseen travelers caught in snow. Each phrase lingers absorbed by mud walls that have heard centuries of identical hopes. The rushlight gutters. The mother trims the charred end, relighting it from a twig-held ember, and presses a dab of beeswax into the base to make it stand firm through the night. Before sleep pallets are rearranged closer to the cowshed wall, the beast's breath seeps through cracks, raising the room's temperature by degrees that mean survival. The mother doles out one final comfort. Dried apple slices steeped all day in hot water, now just cool enough to sip. The liquid tastes like late August afternoons, distant bees, sun-soaked bark, reminding tongues and memories that seasons do change. Even the younger boy, half asleep, smiles into his cup. You lie down, last cloak pulled to chin, listening to the storm's dying whispers outside. Snow settles upon snow, muffling the night, until you can almost hear the hush itself. Yet under that hush beats a sturdy rhythm cows, shifting on straw fire, sighing the faint chime of the elder girl's spindle wound tight for tomorrow. They form a music older than bells, older than tax ledgers, older perhaps than winter itself. A promise that people tools and breath will weave dawn out of darkness again. As lids grow heavy, you picture sunrise glow caught on fresh snow. Drifts the father and neighbors, hauling beams off the miller's roof. Laughter ghosting skyward with their exertions. You see barley sprouting months from now, in rows straight as hymns, every grain owed to nights like this, when families bartered song for courage, tea for sinew, and patience for one more thaw. With that picture steady in your mind, sleep drifts over you like falling snow. Silent, persistent bright with hidden light, tucking every soul in the cottage beneath its soft, cold promise of eventual spring. Gray dawn rises like smoke from a quenched torch, widening the world grain by grain, until the yard emerges a flawless blank scroll of new-fallen snow. The storm has passed, but left its signature in drifts that bury fences and soften the angles of every roof. Before the sun can gild the scene, boots crunch out the first sentence of the day. The father, you, and the elder girl strike a path toward the miller's cottage ropes, coiled across shoulders, poles jutting like extra spines. Breath explodes in clouds that instantly frostbeards lashes even the frayed edges of hoods. Each inhalation tastes of iron and pine resin. Behind you, the mother and younger boy stand in the doorway, their silhouettes stitched to the still-lit hearth, watching until you vanish into a curtain of reflected light. The lane hardly exists. Snow piled hip-high in places, so the father leads a zigzag course along hedges where drifts are thinner. He stamps footholds, then offers a gloved hand to hoist the elder girl over a buried stump. You follow, planting the butt of a pole before every step, rediscovering earth beneath the white. All around, ice-laden branches chime when the wind nudges them, a forest choir singing in glass. Here and there, rabbit tracks hop from shadow to shadow, vanishing under crescents of snow that must be dens. It occurs to you that every creature woke this morning with the same arithmetic: how much strength remains how far to the next shelter, which risk buys the fullest tomorrow. At the miller's yard, the damage commands immediate respect. 3 rafters have collapsed inward, like snapped ribs carving an angular wound across the thatch. Snow fills the breach, shimmering in pale heaps that threaten to sink deeper with each passing hour. The miller and 2 grown sons are already on the roof axes, hacking free the sagging ends, while the wife and daughter tug broken reeds away from the grain room below. Steam rushes from the open loft. Warm air fleeing the barn of stored wheat, carrying with it the faint scent of bread that could have been. The father hails them, and without ceremony, a rope is tossed down. You catch it, loop it around a beam of fallen wood, and brace for the heave. Muscles bunch, snow squeals underfoot, and the beam rises inch by inch until gravity surrenders it to the yard. Work settles into rhythm chop. Pull, toss, shovel. Chop, pull, toss, shovel. The elder girl follows her father onto the roof, despite protests arguing that small hands fit narrow gaps. From below, you see her braid swinging as she crawls, scattering snow in shining fans around her knees. She plants her pull tests each plank before shifting weight and wedges of wood beneath the remaining rafters to brace them until repairs can be made. Moments of tension crackle. One rafter gives a sharp creak, and everyone freezes breath suspended like icicles, but the timber holds after a quick shore-up with a second pull. Murmured prayers slip through clenched teeth before the rhythm reclaims you. Around noon, the mother arrives leading the younger boy and pulling a sledge stacked with oaken splits and a pot sloshing stew under a damp cloth. She navigates drifts with deliberate confidence, setting the pot beside the beached beam where the wind can't steal its warmth. The lid lifts, releasing a smell that brackets the senses like friendly arms. Barley smoked pork and a trace of last summer's sage. Wooden cups are filled. Workers line the path to sip steam spiraling from bowls as if each cup were a chimney. No one speaks beyond curt thanks. Hunger steers attention inward, measuring each swallow against tomorrow's labor. Rest spans exactly long enough for the stew pot to empty and the wind to freshen. Clouds herd across the sun, dimming the world until snow glitters less and shadows thicken. Your fingertips protest when the rope bites again, but the beam you drag now is lighter stripped of wet thatch, trimmed by axes that work as naturally as lungs. Above the father and miller lash new crosspieces between standing rafters, threading rope through holes bored by an auger, heated red in a brazier just inside the barn. Smoke drifts out each time the brazier's lid opens, carrying sparks that extinguish mid-air, yet still feel dangerous among so much winter-dry cane. By late afternoon, the breach is framed with fresh timbers, cut 2 summers back, and left seasoning in a lean-to insurance finally cashed. A canvas sheet, holed from harvest use but serviceable, is hauled aloft and pegged tight to shed snow until thatchers can travel in spring. The miller thanks each helper with a grip that lingers. In his palm, he presses a small cloth packet to the father's stone-ground flour, white as sunrise, milled before the wheel froze. The father hesitates, knowing proud men dislike charity, but the miller meets his eyes squarely. Payment, not gift. Today's work saved the season. The exchange, etched in frost, feels weightier than coin. The walk home traces footsteps now half filled by drifting snow. Bodies lean into the wind, shoulders burning, but spirits perch high. A roof still stands. Grain still waits. Victory in winter rarely looks grand. Sometimes it's a sheet of canvas flapping over patched bones, sometimes a pouch of flour clutched in mittened hands. Near the byre gate, dusk ignites icicles into brief torches of rose and gold. You pause, transfixed by beauty no lord could commission, yet freely lavished on any soul sturdy enough to stand in the cold. Inside the cottage, the mother has ground more rye, mixing it with melted lard and warmed buttermilk. One by one, she slaps discs of dough onto the griddle stone, and the aroma of baking bread lifts weariness from spines. The younger boy rattles his regiment of toy soldiers around your boots, staging battle songs for their march across floorboard continents. The elder girl unbraids her hair flakes of thatch, drifting like seeds. She laughs when the mother plucks one from her fringe and tucks it behind an ear as honorary plumage. Supper time arrives amid candlelight flat rye cakes, cupped around hot stew ladled from the day's victory pot. The father breaks the cloth packet flour dust blooming into the lamp glow and measures a spoonful into each bowl to thicken broth. Conversation weaves between spoonfuls, whose axe edge bit deepest, which beam nearly slipped. How the miller's dog looked relieved when snow stopped hammering the roof. Laughter surges gentle, but robust, echoing off rafters that seem suddenly higher. Even the younger boy's cough is subdued, rolling soft as a coo. When the meal dwindles, the mother saves a spoon of thickened broth, pours it into a small jar, and sets it near the hearth. A sourdough start for next loaves. Tomorrow's strength prepared tonight. The father oils the axe head, placing it upright by the door sentinel, and promise. The elder girl winds spindle thread into a ball large enough for a mitten cuff. You gather stray shavings from toy-making, feeding them to the embers. They flare bright and die young like parchment wishes whispered too fast. Before bedding down, everyone steps into the yard for a final breath. Stars pierce the navy dome brighter for the storm's passing, and Orion hangs low like a watchful sentry. Snow hums under boots, crust already tightening. The father points to a faint glow on the southern horizon, distant village fires, reflecting off clouds, and remarks that somewhere other hands lifted beams today too. The thought stitches invisible threads between scattered cottages, a winter tapestry woven not of wool, but of shared endurance. Inside pallets lie thicker with fresh straw. The miller offered another quiet dividend. Cloaks unfurl into blankets. The hearth sighs contentedly, knowing wood supply is safe for one more freezing dawn. You slide beneath wool, feel muscles throb with honest fatigue, and listen to the household settle the mother, humming half a hymn as she drifts the younger boy, whispering heroics to his wooden army, the elder girl, snuffing the rushlight with practiced pinch. Darkness folds soft, but beneath it glows a certainty hard as oak when storms batter and rafters break hands will answer. When hunger leans close, bowls will pass. In this covenant of neighbor and need, winter loses a little of its edge each time hearts refuse to freeze. Sleep takes you then, carrying the taste of rye and victory on your tongue, carrying the white hush of snow-mended roofs into your dreams. Outside, the cold reclaims its throne. But for tonight, the kingdom within stays warm, fed by the memory of a day when shoulders ropes and courage stitched a roof back onto the world. First light steals through the shutter cracks in a pale ribbon. Not silver, but the faint green of ice beginning to dream of water. Though the world is still locked beneath snow, something in the hush has changed. The cold feels brittle, as if a single hard knock might shatter its grip. You rise with that fragile promise humming behind your ribs, and find the rest of the cottage already in gentle motion. No frantic scrabbling, simply the calm after a crisis weathered. The father stands at the hearth, turning the flour from the miller's gift into a thin paste on a hot griddle stone. Steam spirals upward, carrying the aroma of grain that never wintered outdoors, and the children hover like bees around new blossom, waiting for the first wafer-thin cake to crisp. Breakfast is modest but triumphant. One cake each, no thicker than a thumbnail, dotted with sparks of salt. You savor the crunch-tasting sunlit threshing floors and wheel song in every bite. The mother breaks her piece in half, slipping the larger shard onto the younger boy's trencher without comment. He has coughed less through the night, but his cheeks still bloom fever pink. No one marks the sacrifice aloud, yet gratitude settles over the table like warm cloth. Outside, the sky glints pewter, but a hush in the wind hints at a lull. The father judges it wise to fetch water before the next frost welds the bucket rings shut. He hoists the axe not for wood today, but to chip at the well mouth, then nods for you to join, leaving the mother to tend the lingering embers and mend the girl's snow-spattered cloak. Footing is treacherous after yesterday's trampling. Drifts now harden to crust rise, knee-high, then drop into hollows that swallow the calves. Each step breaks a pane of ice, crunch echoing like distant drums. At the well, you find the rope stiff as a ruler, the bucket rim glazed white. The father swings the axe in measured taps around the stone lip, freeing the frozen hoop that guards the water below. When the bucket finally splashes down, the sound is a richness greater than any coin. The crank stiffly hauls it back, brim dark and steaming. As you tug it onto the sled, he chips extra shards of ice for the roof's patch canvas sags beneath yesterday's weight, and the miller will need wedges once the sky weeps meltwater instead of snow. On the way home, sunlight surprises you slipping between cloud seams and touching the fields with faint gold. For a moment, every flake glitters. The world feels newly minted. You think of barley seeds sleeping in sacks, waiting for soil to soften. The father seems to read the thought. Too soon, he warns gently, yet he smiles as he says it, as if a secret part of him believes spring may keep its early promise. Back inside, the mother has spread clean linen near the hearthstone, laying out a line of weathered tools. For inspection, hand scythes, seed forks, a harrow tooth snapped months before. The elder girl polishes each metal bite with sand and fatback grease until they catch the firelight. Small sons forged for future harvests. The girl's diligence is astonishing. Yesterday's rooftop hazard seems to have minted courage rather than fear. She pauses only to shoo her brother toward you. His fever has broken at last, leaving him floppy and hungry, so you press a toy soldier into his palm. Pine carved smooth, painted with soot and pig fat dye. He arranges it at the edge of the hearth as sentry while nibbling cold cake crumbs. Mid-morning, the mother unwraps a bundle of withered greens from the rafters. Nettles, dandelion tops, and sorrel leaves last autumn's foraging yield yellowed yet potent with the memory of chlorophyll. She crumbles them into the cauldron along with the previous night's bone stock reasoning that anything fresh, even a ghost of green, will stiffen immune humors for the weeks ahead. You help stir, and the broth turns a muted jade hopeful color against the winter palette. Work songs rise while hands stay busy. The father fits a new hornpane into the storm-battered lantern. The mother darns mittens. You file burrs off the shovel's edge. The elder girl hums a ballad about a knight who courts the seasons themselves, pleading with spring to return. Each chorus lifts spirits, the way a rushlight lifts gloom, one small flame, then another. Even the younger boy joins with a soft, la-la voice, scratchy but earnest. At noon, cloud banks muster again, but they bring no snow, only a pewter weight that settles low over the valley. You volunteer to visit the byre. Inside, bovine breath rolls in warm waves. The cows chew cud tails, flicking eyes half-lidded with contentment. You pitch fresh straw, scatter the last of the turnip peelings, and run a hand over one broad flank. Heat radiates through your mitten. You feel as if you've touched the furnace at the earth's core. One cow turns nostrils flaring and licks your sleeve salt, seeking salt. Returning, you catch the father studying the sky through the half-opened shutter. He sniffs the air. Thaw is coming, he predicts. I can smell the river. Indeed, a faint dampness rides the breeze, carrying the distant murmur of cracking ice. The mother raises an eyebrow, but sends the elder girl to gather buckets, just in case roofs start dripping. No one trusts the weather, yet preparedness stands taller than skepticism. Afternoon slides into gray. The father suggests fetching sapwood logs from the lean-to before they soak up moisture. Together, you wrestle 2 sled loads indoors, stacking them bark side out to sweat dry. The elder girl notes the shrinking pile with practiced eye. She and her mother begin tallying fuel left against nights yet cold. The numbers do not sing, but they hum a tune of manageable worry. Twilight arrives early, painting shadow bars across the packed earth floor. The mother ladles the nettle stew, sharp, earthy, reviving. The father crumbles a pinch of coarse salt over each bowl, luxury meted grain by grain. Discussion drifts to spring chores, where to swap seed with cousins, whether the old plow harness can survive one more season if the hedgerows need mending before lambs arrive. Planning warms minds like coals banked for dawn. After supper, the younger boy curls near the fire with his pine soldiers, arranging them in neat rows, facing the door guardians against night. The elder girl unrolls a threadbare map of the parish ink, so faded it looks like spilled moonlight, and traces paths she hopes will clear first the mill road, the river ford, the lane to the Thursday market. Dreams, but useful ones. The father reaches for the reed pipe again, but instead tells a tale he learned from a passing pilgrim of monks who kept bees through winter by stabling them beside oxen, sharing warmth across species. The mother's brows lift. She muses aloud whether their own lone hive, now buried under a drift against the south wall, might still hum. The idea plants a spark tomorrow, dig a path. Tap the hive, gently listen for life. If bees survived, honeyed wax can become candles, and candles stretch evenings into learning hours for the children. Hope, it seems, breeds more hope. Rushlights burn low. One by one, tasks fold away. Tools, oiled cloaks, shaken straw, fluffed. The father banks the fire with 2 modest logs, hazel for quick flare, oak for long glow. The mother slips a fresh lavender rush into the floor reeds, gifting night a hint of summer fields. The elder girl hangs her finished mitten pair on a peg, thumbs pointing skyward like small woolen prayers. As you settle onto the pallet, you catch the father's murmur. If it thaws tomorrow, we'll check the hive, mend the fence by the leak patch, maybe open the smoke hole wider. The mother answers drowsily. And I'll start the bread sponge if the air's warm enough, the yeast will wake. Simple sentences, but they glow fiercer than any torch plans, intentions forward motion. Outside, the snow crust creaks, releasing heat stored beneath. Somewhere ice on the river groans, a deep bass string plucked by unseen hands. You close your eyes and imagine water running free again. Imagine green spears of wild garlic thrusting through sludge. Imagine the cottage door flung wide to chase out stale smoke. Winter still rules, but its crown has cracked. Sleep overtakes you with that image, wrapping limbs in a drowse sweeter than nettle broth, firmer than oak beam. Tomorrow may bring sleet or melt, or yet another blizzard veiling the valley. Whatever arrives, you know the household will answer with rope. Song broth and steady hands each dawn another line, carved into the long story of enduring, of bending, without breaking, of waiting until the world softens and grows again. A soft knocking barely louder than a moth's wing nudges you from sleep. At first, you think it's the younger boy shifting his pine soldiers, but the sound repeats rhythmic, hollow, undeniably deliberate. Dawn has not yet colored the rafters yet. The father is already at the door, ear pressed to wood. In the hush that follows, a second series of taps carries through the yard, crisp and certain. The mother sits bolt upright. The hive, she whispers, voice, half veiled in awe. They're alive. No one speaks the obvious omen aloud, but energy blazes through the room, as if someone had flung every shutter wide. Boots are laced cloaks flung over shoulders, and you follow the father outside. The night's freeze lingers in the air, but the cruel edge has dulled breath still smokes, yet each inhalation feels forgiving rather than punishing. The snow crust holds beneath your steps, except where it sinks in mushy slumps near the southern wall where the hive sleeps. Winter buried the hive chest deep, but a dark aperture remains clear. Bees, meticulous architects, have chewed a channel through the drift. The father kneels, presses an ear to the planks, and closes his eyes. A faint hum rises, less a sound than a vibration in bone. You feel it when you crouch beside him, like the distant thrum of a drum held underwater. Life flickering inside a wooden heart. With hands gentle as prayer, the father brushes away loose snow, uncovering the hive's top board. The mother arrives with a kettle of warm water, pouring a thin trickle into a ceramic trough set near the entrance. Steam curls upward, carrying a scent of loam and faint honey. Moments later, a single bee creeps into the light. Its movements slow limbs, stiff as rusty hinges, yet determined. It pauses on the rim tasting air that has not been breathed in months, then buzzes weakly wings, blurring a second before folding again in contemplation. The father lets out a breath he did not know he was holding. Back inside, the younger boy is awake, eyes shining fever-free. He accepts the news of bee survival as a victory larger than any nightly campaign, cradling his wooden sentries to witness the triumph. The mother sets the cauldron on the fire to warm snowmelt and barley for breakfast, but slips a wedge of candle tallow into the pot. A whisper of sweetness will honor the hive's awakening. As the porridge thickens, light threads through the shutter slits, painting lattices on the earthen floor. You hear the river far off. An irregular murmur ice pan meeting current. The father listens, brow creased, then nods. Once satisfied, water moving means mill wheels soon to follow and flour ground locally, not just doled by manor tithe. Breakfast tastes of barley salt, and something brighter anticipation maybe, or that subtle beeswax note clinging to the spoon. After bowls are wiped, clean tasks divide. The mother and elder girl fetch buckets to channel roof melt into barrels. Glacial drips already tick from the eaves, each drop a triumphant strike against the kingdom of frost. You and the father gather tools for fence-mending mallet, spare pails, lengths of split ash, sharpened to stakes. Winter wind loosened 2 panels near the leak patch. If Thaw holds hungry deer, we'll nose in. The ground greets your boots with an unexpected softness top layer, surrendering to mud beneath. Footprints fill with water as soon as they appear. You both work quickly, pressing stakes deep, where frost still grips stringing woven wattle between uprights. A robin-thin, ragged, audacious lands on the fence top, eyeing you, as though measuring your worth. It sings a short, cracked melody, the first birdsong in memory, then flits away, leaving echoing silence richer than gold. By midday, the sun climbs higher than it has in weeks, though its warmth remains timid. Snow recedes from the south-facing cottage wall, revealing brown earth, matted like a newly shorn pelt. The younger boy squats beside the patch, poking fingers into mud, dragging up a pale thread of last year's grass. He declares it green. No one contradicts him. Inside, the mother lifts the hive frame you carried from storage, a narrow rack meant to hold fresh comb once flowers open. She scrubs it with hot water and a rag steeped in rosemary to discourage mites. The father trims candle stubs, melting ends together to extend burn time planning for evenings when beeswax harvest finally arrives. The elder girl counts. Dwindling onion braids, decides 3 can be traded for salt once roads clear. Accounting feels different today. Numbers still tight, but the ledger's right margin now glimmers with possible surplus. Afternoon brings cloud cover, but no snow, only the smell of thawing thatch and deep soil waking. A neighbor trudges up the lane, burlap sack slung across back boots, swamp black to the knees. He exchanges greetings and news. The manor steward postponed next wood-clearing day paths too soft for sledges. In its place, he says, Lord Gervais has commanded ditch digging along the roadway to guide floodwaters when ice dam breaks. The father grunts agreement, accepting a carved wooden token that marks his household's conscription. Work is work, digging mud less bitter than chopping frozen wood. and water channels mean fields spared from March drown. Evening settles without drama. The mother ladles nettle-tinted broth, now brightened with the last carrot coins rescued from sand storage. The father splits a precious spoonful of stored honey between bowls, a salute to the bees. When the first taste hits tongue, children's faces glow. Sweetness, after so long, feels almost unlawful. Conversation ranges easily, touching on ditch assignments, seed swaps, and whether the faint croak heard at dusk was frog or trick of Thaw. Before darkness, everyone walks to the hive with lanterns cloaked to dull glow. The air smells of damp straw and distant rivers. They place a small felt pad soaked in honeyed water at the entrance, an offering a covenant. Within seconds, 2 bees appear, then 3 slow dancers under yellow flame. The younger boy whispers a greeting. The elder girl giggles when one lands on her sleeve, feet tickling wool. The father sets the lantern on a stump, lets the light linger, so returning foragers, brave scouts buzzing into twilight can find their way home. Back inside, pallets are arranged farther from the hearth tonight. With melt in the air, the fire can be allowed to sleep lighter. The rushlight burns steady flame, reflected in the polished shovel blade propped at the ready for ditch work. The mother braids lavender sprigs into each child's blanket fringe to scent dreams and ward cough. The elder girl sketches bees on a scrap of parchment wings, oversized flight lines looping into hearts. You sharpen the last remaining hoe blade steel, catching rushlight glints like ice slowly releasing sun. As sleep drapes the room, you listen for the river's voice threading through shutter cracks, mingling with the low susurration of bees humming themselves warm in the yard. Beneath that duet lies another sound, subtler than either the earth's crust, relaxing 1,000 tiny ice spines, surrendering to water. It is the music of first unlock quiet, but irreversible. Your last thought before dreams claim you is simple. Winter may wield cold hunger and darkness, but life root wing and human hand answers with patience, muscle, and song. Tonight, the ledger tilts ever so slightly toward the living, and that margin glows bright enough to guide every sleeper through the lingering dark. Dawn slips into the cottage, sounding like water. Not the timid drip of melt you heard yesterday, but a steady glug-glug beneath the frozen earth, as though some hidden reservoir has finally broken its chains. When the father pushes open the door, a gust swings in, smelling unmistakably of riverbanks and cold moss. "It's ditch day," he says needlessly. Everyone already feels the summons in their bones. You gulp the last of your nettle broth, wipe the wooden spoon clean with a crust of rye, and cinch your cloak. Shovels, mattocks, and the freshly honed hoe are shouldered like spears. The mother ties a spare scarf across the younger boy's mouth. Wind still bites and urges the elder girl to tuck beeswax in her pocket, a dollop for split lips, another bit for good luck. Outside, the lane is half snow, half slush. Sunlight curls off the horizon like thin smoke, revealing a road lined with neighbors trudging the same direction. Each boot sinks, squelches pops free. Every footfall leaves a glistening scar that instantly fills with water. Overhead, crows caw, in startled delight, banking across a sky rinsed almost blue. The thaw has cracked the valley open. At the meeting point, a slight rise overlooking the frozen ford, stands Lord Gervais' steward fur collar, dark with melt. He ticks names onto a parchment, then gestures toward the river road, where meltwater already pools ankle-deep. The task is plain carved trenches to usher the flood away from the grain fields before the valley becomes a bowl. No speeches, just the thud of iron blades kissing earth. You anchor your shovel next to the father's first plunge. Soil gives reluctantly top crust, still armored with ice, but beneath lies mud silky as soap. Each heave births a sucking sound, equal parts satisfying and grotesque. Men and women form a ragged line, passing clods by hand to build embankments. Boys scrape smaller channels that ribbon toward the hedgerows. The elder girl takes her place without fuss, hacking weeds away so water can run true. Steam coils from every backwinter's last cold being exhaled muscle by muscle into the dawning spring. Hours stretch marked by the steward's horn at mid-morning. The line breaks for a scant rest. The mother arrives with a kettle wrapped in cloth. She pours hot barley drink into cups that pass from blistered hand to blistered hand. The younger boy scampers, eyes shining, offering wax to cracked knuckles. Even the steward accepts a cup, nodding thanks without the usual hauteur. Mud, you notice, levels more than status ever could. Work resumes under a sun now bold enough to burn shadows onto the snow. Ditches deepen, linking like tributaries toward the main road. With every joined section, the trapped water hisses forward, a newborn stream slashing its own path. The sound of it quickens everyone's rhythm. Shovels sink to the liquid applause. You glimpse the father's face streaked with mud and sweat, but his eyes gleam like they did when the hive first hummed alive, fiercely so. By midday, the first real current races alongside the embankment, frothy, clay-colored, eager. A cheer rises, brief, breathless. Some fling caps in the air. Others simply lean on handles, letting satisfaction seep through aching shoulders. The steward signals a halt. Enough for one day, he says, voice ragged from barking orders, and perhaps a little awe. He promises ale at the manor tomorrow, a rare concession, but folks seem happier with the sight of irrigated freedom than future drink. The trudge home feels lighter. Mud sucks at boots, but the pull is playful now, not punitive. From every eave along the lane, a new chorus of drips keeps time. You spot two bees nosing at a patch of thawed moss, then lifting skyward gold sparks against pearl snow. The elder girl watches them vanish and pats the wax lump in her pocket, as though answering a salute. Back at the cottage, the mother has prepared a pot of leek top and pea greens simmered in the last spoon of pork fat. Steam blows kisses at the soot-black rafters. The father strips off cloak and boots, hanging both near the door, to bleed rivulets onto the rushes. Blisters are dabbed with honey, shoulders rubbed with warmed lard. Even the tools get care shovel blades, rinsed handles, scraped clean of grit. Each one leaned inside to keep frost from stealing back into the grain. While the stew thickens, you and the elder girl venture to the hive to check the feeding pad. It's gone. So is the pad beneath a neat hole, chewed through edges, sparkling with sugar crystals, licked clean. A gentle buzz swells behind the wood, stronger than yesterday. You imagine comb walls trembling honey, warmed by clustered bodies, tiny engines revving for the first pollen flight. The girl laughs a quick trill, and for an instant you feel the entire season pivot on that sound. Evening draws its cool veil, but the air stays moist, forgiving. Over-supper conversation strings itself between spoonfuls. Plans emerge tomorrow. The father and neighboring men will widen the ditch mouth. The mother will trade 2 onions for a clutch of eggs rumored fresh from a hen that never stopped laying. The elder girl will skirt the riverbank to look for willow shoots good for baskets and beeskeps alike. The younger boy yawns through all this head bobbing like a drowsy bird pine soldier still clutched in grime-caked fingers. After bowls are rinsed, you step outside once more. Stars peep between ragged clouds, and the breath leaving your lips no longer rises in sharp columns, but drifts like early mist. Water trickles beneath the crust of snow at your feet, the earth drinking deeply after its long fast. From the byre comes a gentle shuffle, and low moo cows shifting on fresh straw, no longer huddled tight for shared heat. Somewhere downstream, the river snaps another ice plate with a report like distant thunder, then laughs in liquid relief. Back in the cottage, rush lights flicker low. The father sets a log on the hearth out of habit, then pauses as though sensing the fire no longer needs to roar tonight. He banks embers. Instead coaxes them to a soft glow, promises they'll find plenty of breath come morning. The mother drapes wet mittens on the rack, humming a tune that has lost its winter minor key. Even the shadows seem altered, less oppressive, more elastic, stretching toward corners where spring might already be hiding. You slip under your cloak muscles, humming with fatigue, and something keener. The knowledge that ice can crack mud, can channel bees, can wake, and people armed with shovels and simple stubbornness can coax a valley back to life. The ledger of survival, once scrawled only in shortages, now boasts its first surplus entry water set free in time to save the fields. As you drift toward sleep, the sound follows you steady, unhurried, unstoppable. The quiet rush of melting a lullaby for everyone brave enough to listen. Sunrise drapes the valley in gauzy apricot, and for the first time in months, the light feels confident. No timid edge of frost biting at its glow. A fine mist hovers above the newly cut ditches, each channel shining like a ribbon of polished pewter as meltwater courses toward the river. You stand with the father on the cottage threshold, mugs of weak ale warming your hands, and watch mist swirl around the hedgerows. Somewhere downstream, a lone goose honks, testing the thaw-trapped echo before it lifts on heavy wings and angling instinct. The elder girl appears, braids already tight, beeswax still peeking from her pocket. She reports that the hive entrance is crowded with sentries, fanning fresh air inside a sign the queen has started her cautious march toward the upper combs. The father grins around his mug, the gesture pushing last night's tired lines from his cheeks, and announces that today the soil will tell its first true secret, whether it's ready to bear a plow's bite. Breakfast is a hurried affair. Barley cakes rewarmed on the hearthstone, spread with onion leaf wilted just enough to tame its bite. The younger boy crunches his cake like an expedition ration soldier's lined beside his trencher, guarding every crumb. Then tools are divided. The father shoulders the spade and a slender wooden rod his depth gauge, while you collect the iron-tipped dibble for test holes. The mother claims the brush broom, intent on sweeping winter's soot from the cottage walls in honor of cleaner air. The elder girl reaches for a bundle of willow cuttings. Her job is to tuck each supple whip into the bank beside yesterday's ditch, their future roots knitting mud that might otherwise slide away in spring torrents. You and the father walk to the western strip field, where south-facing slopes melt quickest. Snow lingers in shady hollows, but broad patches of earth have emerged dark as fresh ink. The father plants the rod knee-deep in soft ground, twists and pulls. No frost lens shatters at the seam, just damp loam clinging crumbly to wood. He nods, eyes soft with satisfaction. You sink the dibble twist, withdraw. The hole sighs gently, then holds its shape moisture enough, but not pooling. 2 days of breeze, he decides, then we hitch the ox. He kneels, scoops a handful of soil, crumbles it beneath his nose, breathing in the scent, rich, fungal, alive. The smell reminds you of cellars stocked for feast, and for a moment you taste bread that hasn't yet been imagined. Back at the ditch, the elder girl plants willow stakes at precise angles, heel stomping each into place, humming the night-wooing spring ballad under her breath. Water burbles by clear, now carrying specks of silt that glint like powdered sunlight. She pauses when a small frog, green as spinach gone wild, leaps from a tuft of grass and clings to her boot. Frost never killed them all. They merely slept deeper than people can dream. She lifts the creature, sets it on moist ground by the current, and watches it disappear with a muted splash. Life shakes winter from its shoulders in tiny increments. Mid-morning, the mother emerges, cheeks dusted with soot streaks, holding a pail of dirty water and a broom bristling black. She tosses the water onto the path. It runs freely downslope, no ice crack protest. She and the elder girl trade tools. One sweeps ditch banks clean of trampled reeds. The other scrubs soot from beams above the hearth where spiders spin again, apparently sure the smoke storm has passed. Even the cottage smells lighter notes of lye soap ash turned benign. You volunteer to trek to the manor's shed for a new plowshare promised after last year's levy. The path winds along the river, where ice rafts drift like ghosts of forgotten sails. At the shed, the steward's apprentice, a boy with cheeks still round, as apples in August, hands over the iron its curve sharper than a sickle moon. He warns that the forge stock is dwindling. If the plowshare chips before summer replacements will be dear. You thank him, shoulders bowing under the weight, and start home heartbeat synced to the river's murmur. On the crest above your field, you pause to admire smoke curls rising from scattered cottages, each tendril spiraling into a sky the color of dove feathers instead of slate. It's a portrait of community breathing easier if still hungry for full harvests. By noon, the sun coaxes the first ladybird from bark, and the younger boy races to show everyone the red speck crawling his thumb. The mother laughs quick and bright, and fetches a small clay pot. Ladybirds, she insists, are omens of plentiful grain, provided they're treated as honored guests. She sets the pot near the hearth, where warmth lingers. The boy salutes with his soldier before rejoining his miniature garrison. The father lines up animal harness, checking leather for rot-oiling buckles until they shine dull gold. He loops the plowshare through his belt, caressing its edge like a knight sharpening a sword. When you relay the apprentice's warning, he nods sober acknowledgement but refuses worry. Iron's like land, he says. Treat it kindly, it will outlast fear. Afternoon warmth swells. Snow retreats from fence posts, revealing grass the color of tarnished brass. The elder girl returns from the ditchworks, dropping willow trimmings by the door. The mother's spring cleaning advances to bedding. She shakes straw pallets into the yard, beating dust clouds that shimmer in angled sunlight. The younger boy squeals as motes catch on his lashes, but doesn't protest. Fresh straw tonight means softer dreams. Word spreads by foot that the parish priest will host a gathering on Sunday to bless seeds. You recall last year's rite, the faint scent of incense drifting over sacks of barley, the communal hush, as prayers intertwined with hungry anticipation. This year's blessing will taste sweeter for having come through deeper snow. The father counts his seed sacks, fingers lingering over each knot lips, moving in silent math. Enough if the river stays friendly, he murmurs. If not, ditches will defend. Late light bathes everything in honey. The hive hum has grown audible, even from the byre path. Bees bump against the chestboards, testing entrances, marking sky roads. The mother sets a shallow dish of sugared water at the doorstep and steps back. A half-dozen bees land legs trembling under new weight tongues, unfurling to drink glimmering puddles. The elder girl kneels, mesmerized. This is alchemy in miniature water-sweetened energy, forged future. Honey prophesied. Supper is nettle soup again, but today it's garnished with chopped chives, cut from a tuft that dared show green by the south wall. The flavor is sharp, hopeful, making everyone's eyes water in delight rather than smoke. Conversation meanders to the steward's hint of ale at the manor. The father shrugs coin for ale better spent on salt and lamp oil, but the mother wagers that one shared mug won't starve the household. They laugh, realizing such debates mean luxury is creeping back on tiptoe. Night comes with a softer hand. The hearth embers pulse steady, unharassed by wind sneaking through chinks. You lie beneath your cloak, noticing a scent you almost forgot. Damp soil mingled with warm thatch, the perfume of beginnings. Beyond the shutter, the river cracks another sheet of ice water, chuckling like a secret finally told. The bee hum joins it low and persistent, a bass to the river's tenor. You close your eyes and imagine furrows opening under the ox's slow power seeds, falling in disciplined rows, rain following sun in balanced measure. Whether reality meets dream matters less tonight than the possibility itself, a green thought sprouting in every mind under the modest roof. Sleep carries you gently stitched with images of willow roots gripping ditch walls of bees, glinting like living coins of the Father's steady hands, guiding iron through earth, ready at last to forgive the cold. Winter lingers in distant shadows, but the threshold has been crossed. The world now leans toward warmth, and every heartbeat inside the cottage knows the direction, by sound scent and the living memory of Thaw. The morning of the seed blessing dawns, mild enough that the lagoon of mist above each ditch dissipates before the sky turns fully rose. A quick check of the hive confirms the chorus within has swelled no single hum now, but a layered droning that vibrates faintly through the thaw-soft wall. Inside the cottage, everyone dresses with an undercurrent of ceremony, though no one says as much. The mother smooths the elder girl's braids, dusting away a stray chaff flake. The father fastens his belt knife at a cleaner angle than usual, its bone hilt rubbed bright with tallow. Even the younger boy, arrayed in a patched tunic, newly let out at the hem, stands a touch taller. Pine Captain tucked proudly in his sash like an honorary banner, a sack of barley, carefully weighed to leave just enough for sewing rests on the table, waiting to attend its own baptism. The mother ties its neck twice, slips a sprig of drying rosemary beneath the knot, so the grain will smell of green growth when the priest swings incense overhead. Breakfast, hastily eaten so throats are clear for hymns, is rye cakes spiked with the last bee-coddled honey. The sweetness coats tongues in a lingering warmth part, prayer part, courage. The procession up the lane feels like a waking dream. Households pour from every doorway, each carrying a token of the season ahead, jute sacks stitched with care, clay jars of beans, bundles of flax still silvered with last year's dew. Children weave among adults clutching tools to be blessed trowels, hatchets, even a sailor's net for the river fishermen. The elder girl marches beside you willow basket, swinging its bottom lined with wax to keep damp from the seed potatoes inside. She nudges you, pointing to the sky, where two skylarks dart like brown sparks. Their overlapping songs sound impossibly extravagant after the winter hush. At the small stone church, snow only lingers in one north-facing nook. Everywhere else, the ground squelches with promise. The priest stands beneath an archway, garlanded with fir fresh cut, to disguise the stale scent of candle smoke within. He greets each family with a sprinkle of holy water from a twig switch dipped in a copper bowl, murmuring the blessing in slow, deliberate Latin that rolls like warmed oil. When your turn comes, droplets spatter the barley sack, the dibble you carry, even your boots. A droplet slides inside your collar, startlingly cold, but it melts almost instantly against skin already prickling with spring. Inside the nave is chill, but bright windows scraped clear of frost. Reveal sunbeams caught in dust motes and incense smoke, braiding light and shadow into moving tapestries on the worn flagstones. Grain and tools line the aisle like offerings at some ancient temple to practical gods. The priest lifts a candle stub, last year's Easter taper, shaved down by weekly prayers, and lights it from the altar lamp. Its flame is small, yet brilliant, more gold than yellow, and he raises it high voice, ringing against stones, as he intones words that have shepherded seeds for centuries. May these grains quicken in the earth, as our souls quicken in grace. The congregation echoes Amen, a rumble of voices that seems to rouse dust from the rafters. Outside again, sunlight has strengthened loosening cloak clasps and softening boots. The father hefts the blessed barley onto his shoulder. The sack seems lighter now, though no grain has been removed. On the downhill walk home, talk buzzes like the hive which day to hitch oxen, whether the moon's waxing slice guarantees moist earth whose hens have begun laying again. The mother negotiates a trade of 2 flax skeins for 3 fresh eggs delivery, promised once the flock owner can spare them. The elder girl barters an extra willow cutting for a fistful of carrot seed, her first solo bargain. She bites her lip to hide a grin afterward, but fails. Midday heat. A generous term, but true by winter's standards, draws everyone into tasks. The father sharpens the new plowshare on a whetstone moistened with thaw water. Each stroke shivers silver filings into the mud, where they gleam before vanishing. You oil the yoke working lard into every crack of the seasoned beam until the wood glows dark as river stones. The younger boy scatters straw on the path from byre to field, so the ox won't stumble in soft ground. Pine Captain oversees, propped against a post like a silent overseer. Over by the ditch, water gurgles contentedly settling into its banks, now that willow stakes grip the mud. The elder girl wades calf-deep to press each whip firmer, her skirts kilted high. She pauses often, hands on hips inspecting the flow with an engineer's concentration. When satisfied, she plants her last stake marks its top with a wisp of red yarn and steps back, grinning through splattered freckles. Later, clusters of catkins will shake pollen into the breeze, but today, the pliant rods simply look like green promises signed against erosion. The hive draws you after chores. You linger at a respectful distance while bees conduct sorties in widening spirals. Their flights, though clumsy in the chilly air, trace invisible geometry, probing mapping, memorizing the reawakened world. One lands on the blessed barley sack, where it rests beside the door, awaiting storage. It crawls in slow loops, tasting burlap, perhaps communing with the grain inside, about shared futures, one to flour, the other to be milled. You resist brushing it away. Instead, you watch until it lifts off steady, now arrowing towards the crocus patch you only just noticed pushing purple tongues through mushy snow. Afternoon fades into the soft hour when the sun hovers, but no longer climbs. The father tests the plow harness on the ox walking the big animal in a wide curve. The beast snorts steam hooves, thudding in mud that accepts each print with a fleshy slap. The first true furrow must wait for soil to dry another day, but preparation ripples through muscles, animal and human alike, teaching sinew and tool what tomorrow will ask. Supper smells of new things. Carrot tops and chives stew with barley, creating a green-gold broth you would have called impossible 3 weeks ago. The mother lifts a ladleful to her lips, eyes closing as she hums approval. Bowls fill and conversation threads around the table like vines seeking trellis. Everyone shares what they noticed. Frogs, skylarks, crocuses, bees, and every observation knits another stitch in the blanket of spring. Even the younger boy adds news. A puddle near the byre swarmed with wriggling shapes, perhaps tadpoles, perhaps just shadows, but enough to widen his eyes in wonder. Later, as embers settle, the father carries the blessed barley into the storeroom, placing it atop a low shelf like a king on newly won throne. He sets the plowshare beside it, wrapped in an oil-soaked rag edge, protected from careless knocks. The door thuds shut, iron latch sliding home with a note that sounds less like defense and more like completion. Night whispers through the half-open shutter, cool but softer than any that came before. You lie on the pallet, feeling the gentle ache of a day spent courting earth rather than battling cold. From outside drifts a lullaby of many voices, dripping snow, distant river restless bees, and one last celebratory bellow from the ox as it settles into straw. In that chorus, you hear the undeniable cadence of work transforming into hope. Eyes close, and the flicker of dreams takes on the color of fresh furrows, dark and fertile. Waiting beneath a sky-streaked apricot and gold the same sky that will greet you at first light when the plow finally bites and the season turns from promise into practice. You wake before the sun stirred by the muffled clank of the father fastening the new plowshare to its beam. Embers on the hearth still glow, but the air carries a milder bite. A damp scent of turned soil and moss, not the steel tang of frost. While the mother slips an extra layer into the younger boy's tunic, you pull on boots softened by yesterday's mud and step outside. Dawn hovers in a pale band over the hills, and a hush lies upon the fields, as if earth itself is holding its breath for the first furrow. The ox waits in the byre doorway, hide brushed to a ruddy sheen, yoke already settled across broad shoulders. Steam rises from its nostrils in gentle puffs, matching the calm rhythm of its chewing. The father strokes the animal's neck, murmuring promises of steady pace and sweet hay. You loop a lead rope through calloused fingers, feeling the beast's strength reverberate up your arm like a slow drumbeat. Together, you leave the yard hooves thudding in soft ground that wobbles but does not sink, proof that the 2 days of breeze have done their work. At the field's edge, last night's wind has combed the soil into ready ridges streaked dark against retreating snow. The elder girl waits there, clutching a basket of seed potatoes and the burlap sack of blessed barley cut open at one corner. She flashes a grin, a mix of anticipation and reverence, then steps aside while the father lowers the plow into place. He checks the depth gauge one final time, twists the handle to align the share, and nods. On the first pull, the ox leans into the yoke, with a grunt muscles bunching beneath taut hide. The plowshare bites, hesitates at a root, then slides forward, slicing a ribbon of earth that curls away from its edge like chocolate shavings. You walk beside the furrow, guiding the ox with gentle clucks, adjusting pace when the share catches on stones. The father braces the handle's shoulders, rocking feet, digging for purchase. Behind him, the first strip of naked soil gleams, rich, moist, flecked with pale roots now exposed to air. The smell rises loam worms, faint sweetness of last year's straw, decomposed into food for seed. Overhead, skylarks wheel their chorus, riding the breeze, as if cheering the blade. As the second and third furrows open, the elder girl follows, dropping potatoes at measured intervals, heel pressing them into the ground with practiced surety. Every few strides, she casts a fist of barley into the turned trench, the grains ricocheting softly before vanishing beneath closing soil. Her motions are rhythmic, almost dance-like, and the sun now cresting the hill kindles copper highlights in her hair. The mother arrives carrying a jug of warm barley drink. She hands it round, wiping mud from the rim with her apron before each sip. Even the ox gets a ladle of water lips, smacking pleasantly, before returning to the steady work. By mid-morning, the field resembles a parchment half-inked dark furrows marching in neat ranks across the slope. Bright between them, the still frozen strips awaiting their turn. The father calls a halt when the ox's breath comes harsher, white foam flecking its flank. Rest now saves strength later. You tether the animal under a leafless oak, spreading leftover hay so it can chew while steam drifts from its back. The mother lays out coarse rye bread and a wedge of cured cheese aroma, sharp as early weeds. Everyone eats in quiet satisfaction, eyes traveling the already plowed rows, measuring progress against the expanse still brown and waiting. Noise carries on the breeze, neighboring teams starting their own fields. Somewhere, a man shouts encouragement to his horse. Elsewhere, the dull ring of iron against stone betrays someone clearing new ground. The valley has become an orchestra of labor, each farm adding its own pulse to the communal rhythm. You swallow the last crumb and rise, stretching sore shoulders, feeling the ache with a kind of pride. Work resumes under stronger sun. The ground grows tacky. Mud clings to boots, adding pounds to each step, but the ox finds a slower, surer gait. Occasionally, the plow strikes a hidden stone, jolting handles and wrists. Each time the father wedges the share free, you heft the rock aside, and the rhythm picks up again. The elder girl hums the night-wooing spring ballad voice, thin in the open air, yet clear enough to lift spirits. The younger boy stationed at the field's edge marches his pine soldier along the new ridges, declaring them ramparts against marauding winter. His laughter flutters over the furrows, as light as the bees that drift from the hive to investigate fresh scents. Near midday, clouds gather soft cottony banks that filter sunlight into silver. A hush falls. Even birds quiet, sensing a change. The father eyes the sky, then the wet sheen on soil, and decides the last swath can wait. Pushing the ox too long risks gouging furrows that will hold water and rot seed. Better to leave ground breathing overnight. Tools are cleaned against the grass. The plowshare, dulled only on its very tip, gleams under a quick wipe of lard. The ox, relieved of the yoke, shakes its broad head and snorts contentedly. Back at the cottage, the mother has already set a pot of nettle and chive soup to simmer aroma rich and green. She helps the elder girl peel mud-caked stockings from calves streaked with soil. The father hangs the harness near the hearth so leather can dry without cracking, then seats himself on the stool to sharpen the share. Sparks snap and fade against the swept earthen floor as bowls fill and steam fogs. The window talk turns to timing. If rain holds off, sowing should finish within 3 days. The ditch water has cleared to a gentle trickle, proof that the valley's veins now flow in orderly channels. The elder girl shares word from a passerby. The mill wheel turned half a revolution before sundown, creaking but alive. The father's eyes light. Fresh flour may be possible within a fortnight. The mother responds by saving a pinch of salt from her portion, tucking it into a twist of cloth for the first loaf. Afternoon passes in easier chores, checking fence stakes, spreading straw in the byre, scraping the mud from boots, and laying them near embers. Bees hum louder than before a low engine, promising future sweetness. You pause by the hive, appreciating how its timber walls now echo the valley's pulse water, running iron-ringing animals, breathing people, laughing, tired but hopeful. The winter silence has been replaced by a layered song of work and expectation. Twilight gathers lavender at the edges of the sky. The father steps outside one last time, surveying furrows darkening under the cooling air, and draws a deep breath. The mother calls everyone in, bolting the door just as the first soft patters of rain begin tapping the thatch. Gentle cleansing, the exact gift the fresh seed needs. Cloaks are folded, rushlights trimmed. The younger boy lines his soldier at the lintel to guard the new crops from night monsters. The elder girl laughs, plants a kiss on his muddy forehead, and slides under her blanket. You settle onto the palate muscles throbbing with honest fatigue. Rain hushes the world beyond the walls, pooled water dripping from eaves in a rhythm that syncs with heartbeat and breath. Somewhere downstream, the river answers with a deeper roar, celebrating its swollen power. Inside the hearth crackles bees murmur, and the ox shifts in contented straw. Sleep arrives the moment lids close, dream images furrowing across the mined rows of barley sprouting tender shoots. Willow stakes leafing bright beside clear water honeycombs. Swelling golden and over it all. The steady beat of rain, sealing seed to earth. Promise to practice, day to dawn. Rainfall keeps its slow heartbeat on the thatch until well past dawn, drumming out the last crusts of winter and seasoning the new-turned furrows like a patient chef. When you finally unlatch the door, mist billows inside, warm, fragrant, laced with the sharp tang of damp earth. The field gleams beneath a pewter sky. Each ridge drinks in rain, darkening to a near black sheen, while the troughs already cradle thin ribbons of silt that slide toward the ditch. The father joins you, a mug of barley drink in hand, and together you listen for the sound every planter longs to hear on the morning after sowing silence. No plinking hail, no icy hiss, just soft water nursing seed. Behind you, the mother coaxes the fire from red glow to steady flame, laying thin slices of cured cheese on rye, so breakfast can travel outdoors. The ox chews cud in the byre doorway, hide bead polished by drizzle patient as an altar stone. You scratch the bridge of its nose on your way past and feel the coarse warmth of living muscle beneath winter's faded coat, more reassurance that plowing season landed on the right side of fortune. Farther upslope, the elder girl kneels at the willow stakes, tightening the red yarn marker, now sagging with rain. She presses 2 fingers into the bank, testing whether water has begun to undermine the soil. When mud holds firm around her knuckles, she lets out a satisfied breath and waves toward the cottage, signaling the ditch has done its duty. Breakfast is eaten under the eaves. Family-lined shoulder-to-shoulder steam rising from cheese like tiny banners. While they eat, the younger boy recounts a dream in which his pine captain sailed the new ditch like a moat and chased winter wolves downstream. No one laughs at the fantasy. The tale feels half believable in a valley where water has just rewritten the rules. The father ruffles the boy's hair, promising they'll carve a small boat once chores allow. Daylight strengthens, prying apart clouds until streaks of pale blue show through. And with that shift comes decision. While the ground rests, the family will walk to the mill to barter for fresh flour and gauge how the river's thaw has treated the wheel. The trail south unfurls beside fields in varying stages of readiness, some still mottled with snow, others furrowed and gleaming like yours, a few already dotted with neighbors stooped over root clumps. Along the path, smell changes in tiers. First the sweet rot of old leaves, then the mineral sting of wet gravel near the river. Finally, a hint of wood smoke twined with rye chaff drifting from the mill's kiln. Water races beneath the footbridge, no longer snarling around ice, but tumbling bright over stones, carrying shards of last season's stalks that spin like gold slivers in sunbursts. The father pauses mid-span hand on the rail eyes, following the current as though reading a ledger. Fast, but not high, he judges. Flood fears sink a notch. At the mill, the wheel turns in deliberate groans, old wood swelling with moisture, yet stubbornly refusing to splinter. The miller's sleeves rolled to his shoulders greets your party with grin lines so deep they threaten to swallow rain. Fresh flour sits in a small bin, the first grind since Yuletide, slightly coarse, faintly warm and smelling of indoor summer. The mother lays 2 onion braids on the counter, along with a beeswax candle, half the width of her thumb. The miller tests the onion's firmness, pinches a curl from the candle to sniff its honeyed smoke, and agrees to the trade, plus a handful of bran returned for the ox. He tosses an extra scoop of flour into the sack, winking at the younger boy early payment he claims for the boat he expects to see sailing the ditch by month's end. On the walk back, sky opens wider. Patches of blue knit together until sunshine spreads like butter over the hillsides, thin but unmistakably warm. The elder girl spots the season's first dandelion head, tight shy, but defiantly yellow against mud. She plucks it, tucks it behind the mother's ear, and declares it a crown for the kitchen queen. Laughter ripples down the procession, sliding between hoofbeats and the flour sack's gentle sway. Returning to the cottage, you find bees swirling in gold arcs above the crocuses, packing pollen until their leg baskets bulge. The hive entrance buzzes like a tiny forge. Each returning worker exchanges wobbly mid-air greetings before vanishing inside with its cargo. The father rests the flour in the storeroom beside the blessed grain, cross-marking the sack with a soot-stained thumb in gratitude. The mother measures 2 cups into a bowl, adds water still warm from the kettle, and stirs until the mixture sighs into sponge bread for tomorrow. Hope you can smell. Afternoon tasks scatter, but keep sightlines on the sky. You and the father clear broken branches from the orchard strip so sunlight can reach budding twigs. The elder girl unrolls netting to fence early peas against rabbits newly brave after snowmelt. The younger boy gathers fallen cones to dry for kindling. At one point, wind lifts carrying distant hammer strikes from the manor blacksmith, and you realize every craft in the valley has awakened in sinkwood, metal grain wax, all humming towards summer. By sundown, clouds return, but they swagger in soft shades of peach and mauve, promising nothing more threatening than a painter's flourish. The family eats nettle stew, thickened now, with a ladle of new flour. It tastes familiar, yet expanded like a well-known tune, played on a richer instrument. Over bowls, the father outlines the plan for dawn finish, plowing the lighter east strip. Sow oats check traps along the hedge for early hares. The mother counters with her own docket, knead bread, skim beeswax film from simmered honeycomb shards, barter the miller's bran to a neighbor raising piglets. Each ambition sounds feasible, almost easy evidence of winter's weight lifting from shoulders. Before sleep, you step outside one last time. Frogs stitch a ragged chorus along the ditch banks, their croaks oddly comforting proof that water now serves life instead of locking it away. The field lies silent, but not empty. You can feel seed breathing under its blanket of rain-soaked soil, tiny hearts ticking faster than yours. Somewhere beyond the ridge, another plowshare screeches against stone in a late try for progress, and the echo rings like flint-tapping steel sparks to carry through the dark. You inhale damp air laden with flower dust and bee musk, and when you close your eyes, the scent crystallizes into a single vivid certainty. The valley's long dormancy has ended, replaced by motion noise and flavors that have names only spring remembers. You carry that certainty onto the pallet, tucking it beside your ribs like an ember wrapped in cloth, and let its warmth guide you into sleep. Rich with visions of barley heads bowing in golden waves under a sky wholly free of winter's claim. Sunrise blooms earlier, now arriving as a wide ribbon of grapefruit light that spills through the shutter gaps and paints the rafters in gentle rose. Its warmth kisses your cheeks before your eyes open, coaxing you from the pallet with a promise of a day too full to waste. You slip outside while others still hover between dreams and dawn. Mist hangs over the field, but it is a different mist than winter's spectral veil. This one glows from within, alive with the earthy breath of seed stirring under damp soil. You inhale and taste yesterday's rain turned sweet, as if the ground itself is steeping tea for the sky. The father appears behind you, silent in his heavy boots, carrying the new plowshare wrapped in the rag you oiled late last night. Side by side, the two of you cross the yard to the east strip. Dew beads on the furrows plowed 2 days ago. Tiny orbs that reflect the newborn sun in hundreds of pinpoint fires. The ox waits tail swishing lazily, as if it too senses lighter work ahead. Yoke secured and share gleaming, the father guides the beast into the unbroken soil. One soft command, and the animal leans forward, muscle leather iron, and hope moving in a single practiced surge. The blade sinks with a muffled sigh. A new furrow peels open, releasing a scent so rich it seems unfair to keep it all to yourselves. By the second pass, the elder girl trots up, clutching the oat sack, its mouth drawn tight like a purse of secrets. She scatters grain with a practiced swing, each fistful falling into the plow's fresh wound like a sailor diving into safe harbor. The younger boy follows solemn as a steward, dropping small markers, sticks crowned with colored twine, so no row is forgotten later. Sun climbs thinning mist into glitter, and finally into plain air, and the field slowly unfurls a script of dark lines that read to anyone who can decipher, "We intend to eat, come autumn." Mid-morning breaks work with music. Larks cascade above bees, murmur at the ditch, and from the edge of the wood drifts the hollow cluck of a pheasant rousing itself. The mother arrives bearing the first loaf from the blessed flour. Its crust crackles like thin ice, and steam wafts upward, carrying a fragrance that makes knees wobble. She slices it while still warm, revealing crumb the color of pale honey, and hands out pieces slathered with softened cheese. Crumbs melt on the tongue unforgettable after months of coarse barley cakes. You chew slowly, committing the taste to memory as insurance against future lean times. Not long after, a distant shout rolls across the fields, an alarm, but not a panicked one. A neighbor waves from the road, holding something in his fist. When he reaches you, he opens his hand to reveal a small spray of budding hawthorn. He claims to have seen buds along the hedgerow by the manor pond, at least a fortnight earlier than anyone expected. The father inspects the twig nods, then invites the man to share the last chunk of bread. News like bread is best when broken among many. Work resumes with lighter hearts. The plowshare glides more easily in the warmed soil, and by noon, the east strip stands fully ribbed, a dark mirror to the west. The ox pants sides shivering, but its eyes shine with the satisfaction of a job, clear-cut and done. You unyoke the beast and lead it to the byre where the mother has laid fresh straw and a bucket of bran mash. Steam curls from the bucket as the ox dips its muzzle, and its heavy sigh seems to bless the simple luxury. With the heavy labor complete for the day, attention shifts to subtler tasks. The elder girl heads toward the ditch bank with an armful of pea seeds and the willow basket you helped repair. She kneels, pokes quick holes along the moist berm, and presses each seed home like tucking children into warm beds. The younger boy trails ferrying handfuls of sandy loam to dust over the plantings. From time to time, he pauses listening for the croak of frogs to gauge whether his moat remains secure. When he hears one, he salutes with his pine captain before returning to duty. The father retrieves snares he placed along the hedge before dawn. One holds a plump hare, its winter coat halfway shifted to mottled brown. He whispers a quick thanks to whatever spirits mind such exchanges, then carries the catch to the mother. She nods. Approval meat will widen the evening stew and sets to work skinning deftly so the pelt remains intact for future mittens. You help by rinsing the carcass in cool ditch water, the liquid already flavored faintly with willow sap and new algae. As afternoon tilts toward evening, clouds gather but lack menace. Their bellies glow peach, then lavender, casting diffused light over the valley. The hive thrums louder than you've heard yet, a jetty of bees forming and reforming at the entrance. The elder girl, now finished with peas rescues, an exhausted forager, drowning in a puddle, placing it on her palm until its wings dry, and it buzzes away in a drunken zigzag. She laughs, a sound that stitches itself into the very breeze. The mother calls everyone inside just as the first cool gust snakes through the open door. The hare stews with nettle tops, slivers of onion, and one precious carrot. Bread rewarms on a flat stone. Bowls are ladled out. Broth glistens with hare fat. and the meat flakes tender from bone. As you eat, conversation turns practical tomorrow's plan for fencing the pea bed, arranging a trade with the tanner for new boot soles, and whether the mill's extra bran might tempt a neighboring sow to litter closer to home instead of wandering. Each idea feels less like a hypothesis and more like a puzzle piece sliding into place. After supper, embers glow, and the father fetches an old lyre, missing 2 strings, but still willing to echo. He plucks a slow tune, fingers hesitating, then gaining confidence. The melody meanders like the ditch, sometimes bright, sometimes almost sad, but always forward. The younger boy dozes against your knee-pine captain, fallen to the floor. The elder girl braids thin strips from the hair pelt, humming counterpoint to the lyre's wandering notes. The mother sits quietly, eyes half closed, perhaps planning recipes for the inevitable onslaught of greens when the valley finally erupts. When rushlights sputter, you step outside one last time. Stars spangle the sky in reckless abundance, unblurred now that clouds have drifted east. The plowed fields glisten faintly in starlight ridges, holding just enough moisture to shine. Somewhere, a nightjar clicks its wooden call. You breathe deep, and the air tastes of tilled earth, budding hedgewood smoke, and the faint metallic tang of iron still embedded in your palms. As you settle onto the pallet, you feel no urgency, only a quiet pulse of readiness, like seeds waiting in darkness for that final cue to burst. Your muscles ache, but it is the ache of promise kept, and more promises queued at the door. Sleep slides over you softly, bearing images of oat shoots needling skyward, of pea tendrils curling around willow stakes of bees, thickening comb with syrup spun from flowers that have yet to bloom. Above it all rises a single unshakable conviction: the valley's song is playing in major key now, and every footstep you take tomorrow will add a fresh, bright note. A week slips by in a tumble of small triumphs. Pea shoots pricking through the ditchbank loam. Oat rows feathering pale chartreuse against the darker barley bees, returning dusted lemon yellow from half-hidden catkins in the wood. The valley hums like a novice choir just beginning to trust its own harmonies. You wake each dawn to the same bright overture lark trills, river chatter the ox's low rumble, and sink into sleep each night, certain the song cannot sour now. Then, on the 14th morning, after sowing winter launches one last ambush, you open the shutter to find the world transfigured, every furrow willow whip and budding hedge crusted in glassy rime. The sun crouches behind a gauze of high clouds, offering no warmth, only a hard white glare that turns fields into frozen corduroy. A breath fogs thick again, stinging nostrils the way it did in January. In the byre, the ox stamps uneasily, vapor roiling from its muzzle. All at once, confidence wobbles like an overfilled pail on a slick plank. The father orders a quick muster. Someone must save tender shoots. Others must salvage yesterday's progress on the peat smoke bread rising near the hearth. The elder girl hurries to the ditch to gauge whether ice is sealing the water's slow current. Should that happen, new roots could drown. You pull on boots that still smell of warm mud, now stiff with frost, and follow the father to the field. He kneels, brushes a ridgetop with his sleeve, and exposes oat spears trapped beneath a glassy skin. They bend, but do not snap. Still breathing, he murmurs, voice low as church stone. But they'll suffocate by midday if this glaze turns to crust. The plan is swift, almost reckless blanket. The most vulnerable ridges with bundles of loose straw stored in a corner of the byre fodder sacrificed for seed. You, the father, and the younger boy drag armloads across the slick yard. Straw crackles as it hits frozen soil, forming tawny islands in the sea of white. Fingers numb quickly. Breath claws at lungs. Yet the work advances row by row. The mother appears with steaming barley drink sloshing in wooden cups, then hustles back to stoke the hearth. Hotter bread can wait. Seedlings cannot. At the ditch, the elder girl breaks a sheen of ice the thickness of parchment, freeing water to creep onward. She reroutes a trickle toward the pea bed, so moisture will rise when noon sun returns bathing roots from below, while straw insulates above. Her cheeks flame red. Wisps of hair escape her kerchief, frosting at the edges like hoarfrost feathers. She looks older, fiercer. A steward, not a child. By late morning, the pale disk of the sun brightens. Breezes carry a gentler note. Ice begins to bead and slide from willow stakes, chiming softly when crystals collide. Straw blankets darken as rime melts into them, releasing the sharp scent of summer fields hidden inside each stalk. The father tests a covered ridge beneath soil, stays merely cool, not iron hard. Relief loosens his shoulders. He signals a halt. Leave the straw until tomorrow. Let sun reclaim dominion. Inside the cottage pulses with heat. The mother has shoved the cauldron close enough to the fire that soup spatters on bricks. Bread loaves return to life, swelling fragrant and golden. She ladles stew rich with yesterday's hair remnants and a fistful of foraged sorrel she snatched before frost bit down. At table, no one speaks for long minutes, mouths busy, muscles unwinding. Only after bowls clink empty does anyone admit fear, and then only in shrugs, half smiles, eyes bright with lingering adrenaline. The younger boy retrieves his pine captain, now sporting a smear of frost on its wooden helm, and inspects the troop's tiny straw piles dotting enemy territory. The father ruffles his hair, remarking that sometimes straw can be braver than steel. The elder girl snorts, points out that brains guided the straw, and the room breaks into easy laughter that melts the last slivers of tension like icicles in sunlight. Afternoon sun climbs higher, strong enough to wring trickles from eaves. You all troop out for inspection. Straw islands slowly steam. Beneath their thatch, you uncover oat blades. Still supple pea leaves, uncurled, soil damp, rather than soggy. The valley, momentarily mute, resumes its chorus, distant hammers from the manor smithy frogs tuning on ditchbank's hive, buzzing like a kettle near boil. Even the river, glazed at dawn, gurgles freely now. Ice shards twirling past as harmless toys. To mark the rescue, the mother proposes a small feast. Nothing extravagant, but something to tell memory that peril came and was outwitted. The father agrees, dispatching you and the elder girl to gather wild watercress near the spring, where frost rarely lingers. You find emerald clumps nodding above a mirror-topped pool, snip them fast, and race home with hands dripping chili fragrance. Meanwhile, he butchers a spare hen, too old for many more eggs, better taste it now than lose it next cold snap. Smoke from the outdoor pit drifts heavenward, carrying hints of pepper and hedge sage. By dusk, platters crowd the table smoked. Hen glazed with last jar of crabapple jellycress, tossed in vinegar, drawn from pickled onions. Hunks of straw-rescued bread slicked with newly rendered lard. Everyone eats slowly, honoring each texture. The crunch of cress stems the sweet char of apple glaze, the soft crumb of bread whispering a story of wheat reborn. Outside, the sky mints stars in fast succession, but they twinkle rather than pierce. Warmth lingers at ground level like a spell. After supper, the father records the frost in a slim tally book kept near the hearth. One line reads, "False winter St. Cuthbert's Eve lost no seed." He dots the entry with ink, thinned by water you ran out of proper gall months ago, but the mark gleams sure. The elder girl folds scraps of straw into crude dolls, setting them on the mantel as guardians. The younger boy tucks his pine captain among them, forming a straw army ready for any night raid. Rushlights burn low. You step outside for final survey. Straw still steams faintly, releasing notes of hay and sun-dried blossoms. A thin mist clings but carries no threat. On distant slopes, lanterns bob as neighbors inspect their own emergency measures. Somewhere someone strums a lute, or maybe it's just wind threading through loosened thatch, and the tune drifts soft as reassurance. When you crawl beneath your blanket, muscles hum with fatigue, but the weight feels earned, welcomed. You picture straw blankets glowing under starlight, tiny fortresses shielding fragile life. Tomorrow, sun will rise earlier again, and you'll rake straw aside so shoots can greet morning unencumbered. A new task will crowd the list, perhaps fencing beans, perhaps bargaining for salt, but that is tomorrow's verse. Tonight, the valley sings a quieter coda, one that cradles seeds people, and even returning winter itself in a balance newly proven. You let the lullaby carry you down, trusting that should cold strike again, straw armies and steady hands now know exactly how to answer. Dawn glows. Peach along the eastern ridge, but today's light feels different, thicker, almost honey-rich, as though the sky itself has ripened overnight. You open the shutter and find no frost, no mist. Not even dew. The air is already warm enough to leave windows clear. Beyond the cottage, Eve's straw blankets lie where you dropped them now, limp and half golden from yesterday's steam bath. Here and there, anxious oat blades poke through the gaps, stretching like children who overslept and fear they've missed the first lesson of spring. You gather the family quietly, not out of sorrow this time, but to savor the soft hum filling the valley. A thrumming that means life has slipped its leash for good. The father leads the way to the field boots, squelching in forgiving earth. He kneels, parts a straw mat, and exposes a line of sturdy green tips pushing upward with the calm confidence of earned survival. He presses a fingertip alongside a sprout. The soil stays cool, but no longer cold damp, but no longer drowning. "They've taken," he says, voice husky with relief. The elder girl whoops, spinning once on her heel skirt, fanning mud freckles into the sunrise. The younger boy plants his pine captain at the ridge crest like a victory banner and salutes the grain army lined at attention. Straw is raked off in gentle arcs and piled near the ditch to dry for later bedding. As you work, skylarks pour brightness overhead, and even crows seem to caw in a major key. Water still slips through the channel, but its banks gleam newly armored in willow shoots now leafing fox-ear green. The girl pauses to weave a pliant stem into a loop, crowns the boy, then threads another for herself. Nearby bees zigzag between catkin dust and the first dandelion blooms, saddlebags swollen neon. Their hum meshes with the river's rush and the distant ring of smithy hammers, an accidental symphony that neither court nor cathedral could improve. Mid-morning brings the neighbor who first showed hawthorn buds. He carries a bundle wrapped in linen, 6 duck eggs mottled jade and ivory. The drake's been busy, he grins. Trading the clutch for 3 handfuls of oat straw, soft lining for his nesting boxes. The mother tucks the eggs into a basket of moss by the hearth, promising custard on Whitsun if milk runneth over. A second visitor arrives, a tanner's apprentice collecting hair pelts. He offers a thin strap of supple leather in return, perfect for patching the father's scabbard. Transactions feel lighter now, more like favors among conspirators, plotting a warm weather festival than barters born of need. Work shifts to building bean poles. The father fells a stand of slender alders on the far slope, while you and the elder girl strip branches clean. Poles are dragged back, their ends charred in the hearth to resist rot, then sunk beside the pea bed in tidy wigwams. The girl ties each joint with yarn unraveled from winter-scarred mittens. The bright threads flutter like prayer flags in a rising breeze. The mother watches from the doorway, hands white with dough, first true wheat loaf, proofing in a clay bowl, courtesy of the mill's cooperative wheel. Even from a distance you catch the scent of fermenting crumb mixed with brisk spring air, and it lodges in memory like a promise never to be broken. After noon, the sun finds its stride coaxing the valley into full color. Frost-burned grass blushes green at the edges. Alder sap oozes amber where trunks were trimmed. You carry buckets to the hive stump and notice bees fanning wings at the entrance, an afternoon coolhouse to keep wax from sagging. The elder girl drizzles a ribbon of honey water into a shale hollow, a miniature trough for tired workers. One lands on her thumb, tastes skin salt, and lifts off in a lazy spiral. She watches it vanish toward the distant orchard, where plum buds are rumored pink. The father tasks you with your first truly solitary chore of the season: scout the west meadow for wild garlic to brighten supper. You cross furrows, skirt the hedgerow, where the ditch water slows, and step into grass still flattened by winter weight. Soon, pale spear tips catch sunlight under bramble arches. You dig gently with the broad blade of your hand soil, warm enough to cradle roots white and plump. The scent bursts pepper-sweet and vegetal an aroma that once belonged only to summer markets and is now yours for the taking. By the time you head home, your satchel bulbs and your pockets smell like a feast. Back at the cottage, the mother folds garlic greens into the wheat dough, shaping plaits that trap ribbons of green inside coils of gold. The loaves slide into the hearth's makeshift oven, and minutes later, the crust splits, releasing steam-tinted light jade. She bastes the top with egg yolk from the neighbor's jade-speckled shells, and when she pulls the bread free, sunlight crowns it like gilding on a reliquary. The father carves thick slices. Butter melts and carries garlic heat straight to the chest. The children murmur happy nonsense words between bites, too absorbed to speak properly. Evening drifts in with a softness that feels almost borrowed from another climate. No frost forms at shadow's edge. No wind slices under door or sleeve. The ox grazes outside the byre, cropping the first brave tufts, its sides moving slow as tide. You sit on the threshold, sharpening the pea-hoe metal, singing under stone, while the elder girl teaches the younger boy to whistle through a curled willow leaf. Each failed toot sets bees back to buzzing near the crocuses, but at last a clear note pierces the air. A small, triumphant call. The valley echoes in frog chirps and distant sheep bleats. Supper garlic bread. Nettle soup brightened with duck egg ribbons, and a sliver of honeycomb set on a wooden plate tastes like ceremonial first fruits. After bowls are scraped, the father opens the shutters wide instead of shuttering them. Cool air flows in, but it is not the enemy now. It carries orchard perfume and the wet stone smell of river rapids settling into their summer course. Rushlights remain unlit. Sunset alone floods the room with copper glow, dancing off iron tools hung neat on pegs. The mother sets aside her darning content to watch color slide across her children's faces like a blessing in motion. Night finds you on your back in the field cloak. Spread eyes fixed on stars, no longer blurred by winter haze. Orion, your ceiling companion through the long freeze, tilts westward, making room for constellations of warmer months. Around you, ridges breathe subtle warmth. Beneath seeds unfurl root hairs, groping into dark communion. You think of the straw army now resting but ready of the creek's clear chatter of garlic scent and bread crust singing under the knife. A thought settles simple, weightless, irrefutable survival has turned into living again, when you finally rise and walk toward lamplight frogs. Hush at your passing and resume as soon as your footsteps fade. Inside, pallets feel softer than they did the night before. Straw is new, and blankets smell faintly of garlic and sunshine. The father banks the firelighter than at any point this year, trusting night not to betray. As lids close, the valley's symphony river bees. Frogs' distant larks, fluttering in dream, gathers into a single chord that thrums in marrow, a perfect cadence, resolving the winter's long minor key. In that music, you drift beyond worry, anchored by the knowledge that the season's wheel has turned completely, and tomorrow's tasks will be sown not in dread, but in the fertile certainty of growth.